Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here on another fall day, here in 2021. I'm your host, the great Brian Last, and we're going to be reviewing wrestling, somewhat, and then questions and classic wrestling and songs and dance and all sorts of stuff with the star of the Drive Thru, Mr. Jim Cornette.
No, Brian Last. You build me up. You put me on a pedestal that I do not deserve, the star of the show, because this is, after all, your show, Brian Last, the show that you direct, the show that you are the leader of. That we would all of us, myself and the members of the cult of Cornette, we would all be directionless, rudderless, flotsam and jetsam in the broadcasting sea if it were not you with your captainship and your shining beacon of light propelling us past the rocky shores and into the harbor of podcasting knowledge. How's
I agree with you.
Off the top of my head.
I completely agree with you because I know who you worked with before and I know what else is out there. I am clearly the best.
Oh, boy. You need a handyman. That's what you need. I'll paint your ceiling and I'll sort your programs. I'll help you any old way that I can. Hey, baby, I'm your hand. Brian Last had a handyman at Last Manor that delayed our recording here today slightly, not majorly. If I'd have known that was going to happen, I could have tried out one of our new products. If I'd have known I'd have had that little extra time, but we'll talk about that later on in the program. But do you have everything buttoned up over there? Is the drawbridge down over the moat?
I think everything's okay here. Our handyman is here doing work in the house, as happens to many, many normal people throughout the world. I don't know why you made it a big deal. Of course, Swami made it a big deal. He attacked the handyman.
You let strangers in your home.
Well, he's not a stranger. He's our handyman.
Have you vetted this person? Have you done a background check?
Actually,
yes. Is he on any kind of registry?
If you want to know the truth,
Wait, you did a background check on the handyman?
I do one on everyone. It's nothing personal.
Well, I just asked around about the Monroe brothers and got some conflicting reports, but the price was right.
What'd you hear?
I can't say on the air right now some of the things I heard about the Monroe brothers, especially Ralph. She's a real character, I'll tell you. Anyway. This is your program, as we always say, but I just want to update the fine folks out there who've been customers at Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. We mentioned on The Experience, my program, just a few days ago, that over 800 individual orders have already been shipped out. And I've said that this week, another at least 200 will follow. We're on track for that. Of course, I've had my doctor's appointment, got my flu shot, so now the government can keep real good track of me. And I'm getting Stace to the airport to go out to California for her mother's heart surgery. And around all these that we're recording the show. And I'm also going to get another couple hundred orders out this week, and I'm going to pick up speed next week. But the first figures have gone, because I don't have all these other commitments next week. But the first figures have gone out. If you ordered any one item or multiples of that item, like all books or all DVDs or all T-shirts or whatever, even the international orders, by the first of the week, all that should be out, except for figures, and figures only should be out by the first of next week or the following week. Have I confused everybody well enough?
No.
Well, in that case, then, if a train leaving New York at 60 miles an hour going west and a train leaving Los Angeles going 50 miles an hour going east leave at the same time, then how long does it take a grasshopper with a wooden leg to kick all the seeds out of a dill pickle?
The horse's name was Friday.
Exactly. And also, apparently, Australia and New Zealand mail is on hold, at least from this country, or maybe just from Kentucky, I don't know, because of COVID restrictions. So I have a few people's things packaged up, awaiting that to ease up, but I got the inside track with the lovely Bree at the post office. She's keeping me informed on these things. Anyway, a lot of stuff going out in the mail. People have started tweeting about it already. It's heartwarming to see the cockles of other people's hearts warmed by my package.
And you'll be picking up speed next week.
Yes. Even more packages going out next week is what I'm saying. So my package will warm even more cockles next week.
I was going to say, where did you meet Speed and where's she flying in from?
I'll see you're reaching on that one, Brian.
I like that one. That was
all right. It ain't no Slapco Fud, but
that one gets funnier. That one just continues to get funnier. And I can see it being used in everyday life. Just being hysterical.
I got even an update on that according to what I've seen on Twitter. Apparently somebody just included me in on this. But old Fubar Makafakalube, his partner, Slapco Fud's partner on the broadcast, apparently, they both saw it. And they both heard the review and the names that we gave him, and Slapco was pleased on Twitter because apparently he's a fan of ours. So he was flattered by the whole deal. But Fubar did not know what Fubar was an acronym of. And somebody had to tell him what his first name was actually derived from. So, but now they both know what their new names are for that. And somebody even did a graphic and tweeted the picture of them at their announce desk with their new names that they'll forever be known by down at on the lower third. So that was nice.
I think Slapco should embrace it because I think it'll catch on and people will pop when a broadcast starts and they show the Arabic announce team and you see Slapco Fud.
Yeah.
Get a big pop.
It fits on the marquee, too.
It's a catchy name. It's a really catchy name.
A lot of people instantly took to it, gravitated to it. I'm telling you right now, in this day and age, there's not a lot of things that sell tickets in wrestling. We'll talk about that. But I believe that the name Slapco Fud on a marquee in this day and age can sell some tickets. What do you think?
Well, there's a difference between being the commentator in Saudi Arabia and being on the marquee selling tickets. I don't know.
I'm saying bring him over here. We want the Slapco Fud tour. If the Super Summer Slapco Fud tour, if they start setting it up now, June, July, and August, he can go coast to coast all across the United States of America. Meet Slapco Fud in person. Slapco Fud Q&As. Slapco Fud interactive fucking videos.
Slapco Fud Fudge.
There you go. Right there.
We're getting Nuts.com involved.
We'll bring Nuts.com in. There'll be a title sponsor. The Slapco Fud Fudge.
But you haven't addressed a big question.
Of Slapco's Fudge.
It's a fun name to say, and we both enjoy it. But does Slapco Fud actually pass the name test? Can you see it on a marquee? Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Slapco Fud.
Now let's see. We might have to soup it up a little bit. What about Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Superstar Slapco Fud?
I don't know. I don't like Superstar. It doesn't seem like it goes with Slapco Fud.
Well, we'll work on it.
I don't know what does.
6 months.
Yeah, we do it. Wait, what happens in 6 months?
Well, that's the Super Summer Slapco tour.
Oh. So you're going to start in June. Or I guess May.
That's what I just said a minute ago when you were trying to think up something witty to say.
Well, 6 months from now is May, not June.
Well, we're talking loosely.
All right.
All right. Anyway, speaking of Slapco, we're getting slappy here for the big trading card auction at our friends at Heritage Auctions. And they are indeed my friends because the bidding is spirited. We've mentioned this on the program, but we will give you a brief update. My 3 sets, the Series A, Series B, and Series C, I don't know, whatever. The 1982, the first series, and the 2 1983 series of Wrestling All-Stars trading cards, the first trading card sets of the modern era, including the Hulk Hogan rookie card and the Andre card and apparently an almost flawless Iron Sheik. It got a 9.5. And the high-grade Harley Race and Ric Flairs and etc. are currently being auctioned by Heritage Auctions. And the bidding has been spirited, but the auction does not close until November 18th. And these are all 3 sets, except the third set is missing 1 card for some unknown reason that I have no idea, because they've been around here for 40 years. I may not have had it to begin with.
Which card?
I don't, number 18 or something. I don't know. I can't remember. Some schlub. It's not an important one, but I think I blame Norm Keitzer. I think he misshuffled the deck. Anyway, the auction ends November 18th, and if you want to see the pictures of them, look at the auction, place bids, then you can go to a little shortcut, JimCornette.com, and on the home page, on the front page of my all-new state-of-the-art website, just click on the banner. There's a trading card banner there. Boom, click on that, and it takes you directly to the page so that you don't have to navigate through the entire November Fall Sports Collectibles catalog sale at Heritage Auctions, although we encourage you to do so after you bid on my cards. And Brian, I'm appearing somewhere else. I'm doing another podcast. I hope you won't be offended.
Another podcast? This is outrageous.
I'm doing a podcast with someone else. What? And I don't mean to break it to you on the air in this way. It's not you, it's me. But I'll be on the House of Kayfabe podcast with our friend Stephen P. New and our other friend, I guess he does qualify now, Brian Resner.
I have no idea who that is. Our other friend. He's not my friend.
Our other friend, Brian Resner, he's Stephen P. New. If he's a friend of Stephen P. News, he's a friend of ours.
Well, Stephen P. New is certainly a great friend.
His friendship blankets other people and includes our friendship by proxy, because he is such a beneficent person that the warmth of his touch spans far and wide. But this coming Monday, yes, it will be this coming Monday now, November the 8th, at houseofkayfabe.com, the newest episode of the House of Kayfabe podcast will drop, as the children say, and I'll be on it. How about them apples?
You know what? I never listen to anyone else's podcast for, if no other reason, I just don't have time, plus everyone else sucks. I am going to check this out, because I want to see if Stephen P. New is the man to finally take you to task for some of this horrendous behavior throughout the years.
What in the world would I need to be taken to task for?
I don't know, but Stephen P. New is the man to do it.
For giving too much money to charity? For having too many principles?
Yeah, that's number 1 and 2 on my list.
Helping too many abused animals, or, walking too many old ladies across the street?
Just how many abused animals have you helped?
Well, countless. However many thousands of dollars that I've given to the animal charities over the course of the years, I didn't follow the trail of that money to every Dalmatian and Beagle and Shih Tzu to determine just exactly who was somehow enabled or benefited or helped in some way by my individual contributions. I can assume it's a lot.
You know who's an expert actually on charity? Stephen P. New, because I've talked to him in the past about some of the wrestling-related ones that are kind of full of shit. He knows his stuff because he's been on the board of several different things.
Yes, he was on the board of directors of a massage parlor over in Hurricane, West Virginia, for several years.
Hurricane?
Yes. You never been to Hurricane, West Virginia?
I can't even tell if you're doing a bit or if that's a real place. Is there really a place in West Virginia?
Hurricane's in between Charleston and Huntington. Hurricane is at least it used to be the home city of WVAH TV that carried Crockett's programs, and we tried to get to carry ours without success in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Hurricane, West Virginia. Well, and they've also got a Nitro, and it's not that far away. So when people from Hurricane, West Virginia, people from Nitro, West Virginia get together, oh boy, howdy, I'll tell you what, there's some shit goes on.
They glow in the dark.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, their kids are born with orange with 7 arms.
Well, anyway, back to this show, because I'm going to check it out, and I'm sure a lot of the other listeners want to hear it because they love Stephen P. New and they want to hear you taking the task. Finally, once again, where can they hear this?
The House of, drop the. It's House of Kayfabe podcast, and the website is houseofkayfabe.com, and it starts airing across the world on Monday, November the 8th. And speaking of airing across the world, this is something that we failed to mention on the Jim Cornette Experience this past week, and you smartened me up to it, because we got complaints that during one of our recent programs, somehow it broke into an anti-abortion ad from some of these right-wing lunatics.
Yeah.
And we got complaints, and you chased it down and found out that someone under a presumed name had slipped in a false buy. In other words, it did not plainly say this is an anti-abortion ad. There was some chicanery, trickery, deceitfulness going on. Is this correct?
That is correct, and it should be taken care of. And if anyone else hears any other ads like that on the show, let us know, and there'll be another person on the unemployment line. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who did you get fired this time?
You know, every company has their own slap go FUD.
You mean to tell me there's some poor local version of Slapco Fudd kicking rocks, walking down the unemployment line just because he was foolish enough to take an advertisement under a presumed name? That's terrible.
You know, it's hitting me as we're talking about this. One of the problems with Slapco Fudd, although we've seen the Slapco Fudd, when you hear a name like that, I think it lends itself to overalls. Like a different look than Slapco Fudd has.
I don't know. I think all Slapco needs to do is hang around the wrestling locker room and was one of these other guys that has gotten rich, because they're all getting rich lately. Everybody's either the GameStop stock, whatever, or the LBOs. But that seems to be a thing. So maybe Slapco Fudd could be down and out on his luck, and is suddenly like, hey, he goes to Las Vegas like old Happy Schnavitz, and he wins all this money, and then he's rich. So he's at the same time he's new money, so he's very gauche with it, and he buys a lot of bling bling and things. So you don't think Elmer Fudd has poisoned the name Fudd? No, I think Fudd is poised for a comeback. I think the name Fudd, you know what? There's not a lot of Myrtles anymore. When's the last time my first grade teacher her first name was Myrtle? I won't give her last name in case, if she's still alive, she's in the record books. Because she was 60 then, and I was in the first grade. But her first name was Myrtle. When is the last time that you met a Myrtle?
I don't think I've ever met a Myrtle.
See there? And I'm telling you, it's poised for a comeback. The Myrtles and the Gladyses and the Ethels.
I don't know about Ethel. That's a hard one to bring back.
Oh, come on. Kennedy? Barrymore?
Ethel Kennedy. When did she die?
Well, I haven't been keeping track of her. Is she dead?
Hold on. Is Ethel Kennedy going to lead the comeback in the name Ethel?
I'm just saying that Ethel is a fine woman's name. You got the Kennedys, you got the Barrymores, you got the Kennedys and the Barrymores and the Ethel category.
And she's still alive. She's 93 years old.
Well, there you go. And they live long too. I'm telling you, we're going to start a trend now. You're going to see in 9 months or so, a lot of the cult of Cornette, the young babies are going to be named Ethel, Gladys, and Myrtle.
No love for Rosalind Carter?
Rosalind's kind of I don't know, it's okay name, but
she's
it doesn't
still alive.
Stand out.
She's still alive. In terms of names that lend themselves to longevity, you got to consider her.
Well, in that case, everybody should be named Methuselah.
All right.
What do religious people say when the kid comes home, 6 or 7 years old, and then he said, well, what about this Methuselah? How did he live to be 900 years old? You know what the answer I always heard, the answer that every kid that I ever asked heard? Well, people lived longer in those days. How? How the fuck would 2,000 years before electricity and penicillin and doctors with stethoscopes and x-rays and hypodermic needles and all, how 2,000 years before that would people live to be 900 years old when cutting-edge medical technology was leeches? There's a question for you. I bet nobody else in podcasting has asked that particular question this week.
Well, not this week, or wrestling podcasting for sure. I'm sure there may be a religious podcast that tackles that tough question.
Well, somebody listen to it for us and bring back the answer.
All right. Well, speaking of answers, we've got questions later
Yep.
that we have to get to. There's like an outcry. People want to hear their questions. They want to hear the classic wrestling talk.
They'll never get them past you. That's the complaints I'm hearing.
That's not the complaints I'm hearing.
You play the favorites. You only read the questions that are formulated in the form of a question, that are spelled correctly with some punctuation, and occasionally all of the words in the proper order. You discriminate against the people who send gibberish and nonsensory, and we should be just like every other program and give equal time to gibberish and nonsensory.
And we do that each and every week with the AEW reviews. So I don't see what the problem is.
Okay, well, touche.
Touche. Well, speaking of which, we'll get to the gibberish and nonsensory of the listeners a little bit later, but let's get to the gibberish and nonsensory of Booker of the Year.
And by the way, we are going to have some fascinating classic wrestling talk in the realm of finance, the wrestling business, how much money promoters made, how much money wrestlers made, and why later on, because I'm curating that question. But I tell you what, I got to be honest with you. I try not to be as hard sometimes on Rampage as I am on Dynamite for the atmosphere, because I know the conditions they are laboring under in shooting Rampage on Friday night or on Wednesday nights after the Smackdown, the Dynamite taping. And as a matter of fact, I got an email that I want to read a couple of excerpts out of before we talk about this program, because it was from somebody that was there live in the crowd when this program was shot. We're going to talk about. He was at the Dynamite Rampage taping last night in Boston. While I mostly enjoyed Dynamite, the stupid costume match they had for the main event almost ruined it, except for the Hangman reveal at the end, which we all saw coming. It's nice to know that you can predict the surprises. But anyway, he's reaching out to talk about what it's like at the Rampage taping and why the crowd is sometimes dreary. After Dynamite ended, Tony Khan came out like he did the start of Dynamite to try and hype the crowd for Rampage, going over the matches. They're changing the ring setup, and they'd start afterwards. At 10:15, they announced Rampage is starting soon and introduced all the commentators with their intro music. Then they did a countdown, which then by the time that they got Danielson and Kingston in the ring, it was 10:30. They'd gone 30 minutes without seeing any matches sitting there at that time of night. So bless the people for being as involved with Danielson and Kingston as they were. But then after that match, there was about a 5 or 10 minute break. So Martin and Seidel went on about 10:50-ish. And of course, the crowd kind of, and that match ended a little past 11, and another 5 or 10 minute break before Brit Baker and Abandoned, which apparently is what that young lady was as a child. This is my comment, by the way, not the emailer John from Peabody. Anyway, the girls' match started at 11:15 after the CM Punk interview played on the screen. Again, it's 4 hours now at this point. And then he makes a funny comment about how they tried to break the table so many times. The people at that point started chanting, "Fuck the table." And then when he says, then they brought out thumbtacks, which I turned to my buddy and said, "Fuck this, I'm done," and turned away from this. By the time that was done, it was 11:30. So they're going to have to, I know that this program just debuted in August, but it's now October, and it's now November, I'm sorry. And it's a national television program, and it's not like Smoky Mountain Wrestling or Memphis or, Joe's Territory Wrestling. They've got the money behind them to do another night of taping. Even if they wanted to save money and try to tape, since it's only an hour program, the Friday night Rampage, I know it fucks with their continuity, but tape 2 in one night. Run a separate show on a Friday, have your Thursday break to reset and do shit, run a separate show on Friday, somewhere near your Wednesday night taping, and do one live and put one on tape, and get creative on the taped bi-weekly program with some VTR inserts that you can put in to update the program and not give shit away in front of people. It's not impossible to do that. It's just a little challenging logistically. Because elsewise they're going to, they're not only going to burn these, at some point, even these people who love everything are going to go, my God, I can't go and spend another 6 hours in the building to see another one of these shows. Or just the blasé response that a lot of this stuff gets on the television program for the sake of the audience at home viewing. What do you think, Brad? I mean, certainly to God, I know production is expensive, but they just got a separate television show added. So they might have to think about not treating it like fucking internet matches. What are your thoughts?
I'm someone who actually doesn't have a desire to go to shows anymore. It's been a while since something made me want to go to a wrestling event. And even then I didn't go. So when I hear about AEW and I hear people get excited, and I know people work for the company, and every now and then they'll say, oh, are you going to go to the show? And I, tell them the truth. I'm just not interested. And then when you hear about a show and you think about the length of it, and it's not just Dynamite, it's Rampage, it's YouTube. It's a lot of wrestling, and no one ever came out of those WWF tapings liking wrestling more. You know what I mean? Like, no one ever did, and those were squash matches, so it's a different thing, and it's a different environment and different fan base altogether, but it is a lot of wrestling for one night, and I do think, beyond anything else, it may be beneficial to AEW to have another night to run with. You don't have to just run one night a week and then Universal Studios or whatever you're doing. You can run 2 nights a week and do something else.
And also, when you do have your main stars on Rampage, either you had to leave them off of Dynamite, or it's the second time that people have seen them live when they come out. And so there's not the, But anyway, having said that, some of the, was here at the start of this program. Bryan Danielson. He's a big-time fucking name. He's a big deal. They're in the world title tournament. It's Eddie Kingston. I don't have anything against Eddie Kingston, except that, honestly, his gimmick is that he's a fucking, he's the modern wrestling version of Chuck Wepner. He's a fucking plug ugly fuck from New Jersey or New York that gets by on guts and fights his heart out and all that stuff. So I understand he's not going to look like, Lex Luger, but it's when he's standing next to Danielson, his upper body, I'm just like, for the sake of a new viewers, because that's the problem. This show had 500,000 more new viewers on August 20th than it does now. When Punk came back, a lot of people sampled it, and they dropped back down to lower than where they were before, because I think you've got this is a big stage Ring of Honor duel from 2010, 2011. The old school Ring of Honor fans, the original fans that loved the 150-pound fishy white flippy guys, but it couldn't keep Kerry Silken in business, versus the newer fans that were starting to be created by the Sinclair television program that would go to the live events and go, my God, this is the most insane, outrageous, wild, exciting wrestling we've ever seen, and we can't scream loud enough, because they'd never seen anything like it because they'd been used to WWE. But the problem is that the original fans couldn't accept that Ring of Honor was growing up and using more mainstream, major-looking star talent. They even fucking got outraged about Hassan Benjamin. There was a debate on the internet. Who should come in, Hassan Benjamin or the Super Smash Brothers, which now, by the way, are Evil Uno and Stu Don't Call Me Dick Grayson. They were supposedly the greatest tag team in the world 10 years ago when they were impersonating video game players. You got two audiences, and the audiences that like this fucking tomfoolery that the Young Bucks and the elite ilk, that's what they do, and they're not going to stop doing it, and their people love them for it. But there ain't enough of those people. And when the people that have not watched wrestling for a while, but were fans of legitimate Major League Wrestling, tune in to see a CM Punk or a Bryan Danielson, when they see the tomfoolery or the garbage matches or the obvious parody skits of wrestling that the other segments of the talent are doing, they go, okay, this is kids, except for Punk is slumming or Danielson's slumming. That's the response they get. So in 6 months, they might have better matches if they book the fan bases against each other. Having said that, here was in the world title tournament, 2 more baby faces fighting each other. And has there been, who was in this tournament? Look up while I'm talking about this, Brian. Look up the tournament brackets if you can, because has every match in this tournament been a match against or 2 top baby faces against each other, except for when Moxley chewed up the masked dork order job guy who for some reason was in a tournament for a shot at the world title. That's the only, and they're turning Moxley heel. So but actually is the dork order masked guy a jobber? Is he a baby face too?
Here is the brackets, or here were the brackets, or here are the brackets. One of those ways is correct.
What heels are in this tournament?
Eddie Kingston defeated Lance Archer.
Poor Lance, that's when he fell on his head, so there was 1 heel.
Bryan Danielson defeated Dustin Rhodes. Orange Cassidy defeated Powerhouse Hobbs.
2 heels.
And Jon Moxley defeated Preston Ten Vance.
Forgot that since the Dork Order are technically baby faces, he wasn't a heel either. He just got beat up by another baby face who they're probably switching heel.
Yeah, they're baby face. Dark Order's baby faces, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking Jon Moxley, mainstream name, top babyface, should be bloodying and beating up a masked job guy that was a heel, not a babyface. But I forgot Booker of the Year. So 8-man tournament, 2 heels, and they're both out. All righty. Anyway, Danielson and Kingston had the match. They opened with kicks and chops. And they did more kicks and chops, and they pretty much closed with kicks and chops. I can't knock it. They approached it like a fight. It was a very slow build where they approached it like a fight. At least Danielson, at one point, Kingston tried to do the little fast chops that look so goofy because it's Japanese, and they all do it because some Japanese guy does it in the corner. What are they? What guy does that? They call them somebody's chops.
Well, Kenta Kobashi was doing those chops when he was an active wrestler. He hasn't been an active wrestler in 15 years or so.
Yes, and as I recall, they didn't look so stupid when he did them. Although maybe that's just faint memory. But everybody else that tries to imitate it. But Danielson blocked him. And they did a strong style match. There are people who like them, and I like them sometimes, but we've seen a lot of it from, can anybody do some arm drags and body slams and hip tosses? Danielson's chest got turned into hamburger by all the chops. And Kingston pretty much kicked Bryan Danielson's ass through this entire match. At one point, they were cheering Kingston while he was biting the other babyface's face. And then they did more chops and forearms and kicks. And they're doing strong style matches from Japan because they're both fans. I revert back to the story of the Midnight Express and the Fantastics. Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers 4 times a year would go over to work for Giant Baba. And they have $5,000 a year 30 years ago or more. Or $5,000 a year, $5,000 a week. So that was a nice spot. But every time they'd come back to the United States, whether it was in Crockett or then later on in Smoky Mountain when it was Bobby and Jackie Fulton, they'd be in the ring with Stan and Bobby or Stan and Tom Pritchard, and they said, Jesus Christ, it's going to take them another 2 or 3 weeks to learn how to work again now that they're back. So they just beat each other up, traded forearms, and then Eddie crawled over to Danielson. Danielson got him in a head scissors. Eddie Kingston gave Danielson the finger and passed out in the triangle choke thing, and the referee stopped it. it wasn't Flair and Steamboat. There was the only thing similar was a lot of chops, but otherwise it wasn't Flair and Steamboat. What? Brian, and then they both laid there forever. So Bryan Danielson already has been taken to the limit by Eddie Kingston, who's been primarily a tag team guy, and all due respect, he's the hacksaw Duggan of the piece here, but Danielson just got there. He's in the mix with the world champion, and he's done everything he could do and pretty much got his ass kicked by Eddie Kingston here and barely won. And then Danielson tries to shake hands and Kingston walks out on him. So is he switching heel? But what? I don't know. There was nothing funny. There was nothing stupid, excessively phony. It's just, this wasn't nearly as bad a match as Danielson and Minoru Suzuki, which was just ridiculous. And just because he's a fan of Suzuki, who he's been or whatever, that they had that match. It wasn't that bad, but it's just more of the same shit that everybody's doing. What do you think?
Well, I kind of agree with you, because that's what I was thinking during the match. And to throw back to something I enjoyed earlier this week, the Serena Deeb Shida match. I mentioned how Serena Deeb, she's the woman of 1,000 moves now, and she's been wearing, I think, an outfit that's kind of a tribute to Bret Hart. And during that match, and I love that match, there were things that reminded me of Bret Hart, like working a body part, and then going back to that later in the match, things like that. I'm not saying every match has to have that, and I sound like such an old man. Work a body part, just work a body part. But tell a story other than I'm just going to chop you, then you chop me, then I'll hit you, and then you'll hit me. Eventually, look, those fans are going to be into anything, especially with those two guys, and Eddie Kingston was as over as Bryan Danielson there.
Yes.
That's important to point out. He was just as over as Bryan Danielson. Eddie Kingston has a very unique charisma, maybe more unique than anyone else in AEW, because he looks the way he does, and they love him, and he's a great promo, and he doesn't have to do too much. But I don't like this style of match. There's nothing against these guys, and they were intense and into it, but when Bryan Danielson's chest is all beat up because he's standing there letting Eddie Kingston hit him while he grimaces, waiting for his turn, if you're into just hard hitting, if you're into just no working, just we're actually going to hit each other, I could see why you like that. But to me, I don't like that kind of story in a match. And for that reason, I didn't really like this match. But again, Eddie Kingston, super over. I don't know if he's going to turn heel, but if Moxley's turning heel, you might as well turn his best friend heel too. And the other thing I'll say, and it was throughout this whole show.
They won't have any baby faces in the next tournament.
Throughout this whole show, it was a big problem. Jericho screaming on commentary was hideous. And that was another big problem with the show. And I wonder how many people either mute the show or don't come back to the show because of Jericho screaming. I wonder if there's anyone, because there are points where if I didn't have to watch it, I wouldn't watch it because he is so fucking annoying.
I turn it. I can hear the sound going on and I can hear people talking, but on the Friday night show, I turn it down and just make notes on what I'm seeing because I don't want to hear excrement or Jericho scream.
I'll take Excalibur and Taz. I'll take that as a combo. I think Excalibur would be bearable with that. But having Excalibur and Taz and Ricky Starks and then Jericho screaming over everyone, it doesn't make any sense. Why have a 4-man booth? And then Mark Henry just smiles for a few minutes. It just doesn't make any sense. But going back to the match, those are my thoughts. And I like both guys. And I think they have something special with Eddie. And it's hard to put your finger on exactly what to do with it. But he is super over. But I don't like this style of match.
It was Boston, which is the Northeast. So that's Eddie's primary territory. I don't know if they would love him as much in Los Angeles as they do Danielson, but they may now, because that whole match was about getting Eddie Kingston over before he got accidentally beaten, pretty much. I don't know. Tony Schiavone interviewed the belle of the ball of Rampage ratings, CM Punk, one of the best interviews in the business, who got out 5 words before Eddie Kingston comes in yelling at him and they get an interaction. I'm not saying that angle shouldn't have happened, but the timing of nobody ever gets a chance to say anything. What would they have said if they had not been interrupted on all these million times, all these people? They obviously had something to say. They were out there. Can we get something out from but anyway, Kingston comes in yelling at Punk. Punk is very fucking believable in fucking jousting back with him. And a bunch of people herded Eddie Kingston out. So I'm assuming that this is leading somewhere.
I really like this. And I understand your point. Punk's one of the best talkers there, and he's also someone that moves the needle. Give him more time. But if you're going to do something like this, which is a little bit of an angle, do it Friday night. If there's ever going to be a time to not let Punk talk too much, there's this. And I thought it was interesting, and Punk played it really well. And Kingston, again, he's really believable. So the idea Punk's about to talk, and all of a sudden, an angry Eddie Kingston comes into the back, yelling about the fact the referee stopped the match, and then he gets in Punk's face. I love this. I thought this was tremendous.
I'm not saying that once they got into it, it wasn't good. I'm just saying let him say something first. It's just, again, every interview. And here's something else. People get mad at me for going, oh, God, this and that. You should have given this a chance. Same thing with you got mad at me, and other people did too, for not watching Serena Deeb and Hikaru Shida last week. Brian, let me ask you a question.
Okay.
You took me to task for this because you said it was an excellent match. And I actually had to agree with you that it probably would have been good had I watched it. But I gave you the reason why I didn't watch it, because I was sick and tired of all of this, and you punctured holes in that. You said, but she does not like the others. But this is a test case. All the people out there, in other words, everybody except the people that watched this episode of Rampage. There were 500,000 people watching this. There's 300 million people in the United States. Or is it 350 now? Let's say
it's probably closer to 350, but was that the number? Was it 500,000?
500,000 and change. So let's say that there's 299,500,000 people that didn't watch this program that probably don't know who Hikaru Shida is or care. But if they watched her on television, they might if she's good, right? That's the idea.
Right, that would be the idea, yes.
Okay. So, if all of those people sat down and tried to watch her on TV, but the first thing they thought of is, oh, wait a minute. They've done this to me before. They had a 98-pound, 5-foot-tall girl with buck teeth and wearing lace doilies on her wrists named Riho that they shoved down our throat as the supposed women's champion. They had another Japanese lady that they brought over from a promotion that wrestles matches in apartments, not a ring, but in rooms and apartments, coming out from behind a curtain. And she also dressed up like Freddie Mercury, complete with mustache. They also brought over another Japanese mud show talent, previously from one of the, what do they call them? The bands over there, the pop bands.
Yeah.
The pop bands.
That's what they would call pop group, sure.
Okay, a girl who claims to be a wrestler was formerly a member of a pop band and who called herself on the internet the Queen of Shit and Piss. And there was another one, and I forget what it is that she did, but there was a few more. So I'm going to, when I see, after that, I see another Japanese young lady, I'm going to say, well, they fooled me a bunch of times, so I'm not going to pay any attention to this. And then a quality talent is shortchanged by the public, which is a classic example of don't fucking waste your goddamn chances to get people over by presenting a bunch of people who look or dress or are in some way acting or speaking or doing things the same way, and they are complete silliness, and then bring in a real one. I'm not saying there's no Japanese girls that can't wrestle. And I'm not saying there's no Japanese girls that can wrestle. I'm saying some can and some can't. And their track record of bringing in ones who can versus ones who can't and giving them stupid, silly gimmicks has muddied the waters, as my Uncle Tommy used to say. When you muddy the water, then you take the new and the shiny and the attractiveness off of everything. So can you deny, Brian Last, that they have brought in a string of the most ridiculous subpar talent in the world and tried to foist them off in the name of Japanese lady wrestlers and then blame anybody for not believing it when they give us a real one? Huh?
I think you're being incredibly unfair. But let me explain why. I agree with you on, I don't even remember what was the pop star's name. It was one of the funniest things I ever saw.
Maki Ito.
Maki Ito. I agree with you on Maki Ito. I agree with you on Emi Sakura. Rio, you and I won't see eye to eye on. But Shida's been the only one that's been a regular from the beginning. And she's been world champion. So she's been presented as a top person from the beginning. She could do promos in English. She actually speaks English better than some of the fucking American guys there from what I've seen.
You don't need to defend her because I'm willing to say, okay, apparently she's legitimate then.
But I guess...
And it's another reason why that we shouldn't have been... What if before people saw Bruno Sammartino in New York, they'd seen Jack Pfeffer's Bruno San Martino? Or what before they saw Bobo Brazil in Detroit, they had seen Jack Pfeffer's Hobo Brazil?
Well, no, it would be more like if someone tuned in for the main event at Dynamite and said, I never want to see a silly white guy ever again. That's the issue. If someone saw that match and then turned around and said, I don't want to watch Bryan Danielson, I'm not even going to give him a chance.
No. Only if you had a guy that looked like Bryan Danielson, that dressed like Bryan Danielson, that had a name similar to Bryan Danielson's, and was the shits. And you saw about 4 or 5 of those. And then when Bryan Danielson came along, you saw, he looks like those other jackoffs we didn't like.
But Shida's been there from the beginning, like I said. I can understand, I forgot her, Maki Ito. I keep forgetting her name. Maki Ito and Emi Sakura.
Okay, but
there was the other one dressed like a genie. I don't even remember her name.
Yes, that's what the genies and the prospective viewers that are not watching these shows have not been there since the beginning. So they don't know. All they do is they see a show or two and they go, I don't like that.
But if that's
when they see something else that looks like what they didn't like, they don't like it either.
But if it's that regular viewer, not you, because you are watching it every single week, if it's that regular viewer, they have not really seen an embarrassing Japanese female wrestler in quite a while.
I would say anybody that sampled an AEW television program in the first 2 years has seen some embarrassing wrestlers of various stripes.
I will say this, and I know you're not going to watch it, but there will be a rematch. There will be a third match. If there's not, I don't know what Tony's doing.
There will be a rematch.
There will be a rematch.
It'll never be over. I'll watch the rematch.
That's what I'm saying. All I'm saying is this.
Top to bottom.
Take your feelings about Omega out of it. Take your feelings about any of the other Japanese women that have come over and worked for AEW, because Shida is a bit different. She's been there. She speaks English. She's been pushed as a main event star. She's been pushed against Brit Baker and everyone else. And she works well with Serena Deeb, who's on another level right now as far as being a mechanic in the ring for the women's wrestling divisions throughout wrestling. Well, that made no sense at all, but I tried to put a sentence together on the fly. But Serena Deeb right now, like I said, she reminded me of Bret Hart watching that match. And it was a really good match.
You don't have to sell me on Serena.
But you can't just hate the match because of who goes over. If it's telling a story, that makes sense.
I'm just saying that I was tired of seeing the Jack Pfeffer crew. They shouldn't have muddied the waters, but I'll give them a chance. Yeah, and by the way, while you were tuning Jericho out, did you notice that he was wearing Mrs. Sameface's wig? He stole the wig that old Candice LaRue has been wearing for some time.
LeRae. I think is it Candice LeRae or is it LaRue?
It doesn't matter.
All right.
Matt Seidel versus Dante Martin was the next match. And of course, this was in the continuing saga of Dante Martin being managed or mismanaged by Lio Rush, and what are Lio Rush's intentions toward Dante, and Matt Seidel's trying to block Dante at the start from talking to Lio, or Lio from talking to Dante, but they started out, I wrote, hey, they're wrestling. I saw an arm drag. They just won a couple of minutes at the start of the thing, and they were wrestling. People were kind of dead, as the email mentioned, and whatever, just a couple of minutes, and they went to the break. And Dante Martin did a couple of things, but coming back from the break, it got a lot better. But Dante Martin is like the bus driver they find on a talent show that sings opera like Pavarotti. He does incredibly athletic stuff, and he's got the hang time, and he's got the balance and just the entire athletic ability, but he doesn't look like he should be able to do any of that. And body-wise, he's got to work on, Bobby Eaton had no visible muscles, but he had a little beef to him. He had some tone. You don't have to be a bodybuilder, but he's just got to work on some kind of the upper body. And
he's still young.
He's still young. He's only 20 years old. That's why I say he's a puppy with big paws, and he needs to fill out. He's got to work on his facials, but later on in the match, when he really started getting fired up and had some adrenaline, he had some facials, but he looks like Mr. Mope around a lot, especially in the interviews, and he's got to brighten up on that, but he can do shit, and this is the kind of guy, number one, because when he does a missile drop kick, he jumps higher off the top. When he does the moonsault, he goes higher. When he does a dive over the top, it's more graceful. That's why he should be one of the only ones in the company allowed to do some of these things, because then it would stand out even more, and he's the best at it. So when you see that, then you decide you're going to fucking do something with a guy like this, then you keep 2 or 3 of those things that would be sacrosanct, and nobody else does it, but that's never going to happen in this company. Everybody does everybody's shit, and everybody does everything over and over. But it would make it more special. And there's also, this is the kind of guy, because of his face, to be honest, in the territories, he could have not only gotten 2 or 3 years of experience before almost anybody ever saw him, which, as we've mentioned on shows recently, is impossible now. Anybody that's got a good bone in their body, you see him around the world now. But if he could have gotten 2 or 3 years in the territories underneath, experience, nobody's seen him really, then some booker takes chance on him, says, I'm going to put a mask on you and make you a spectacular baby face, and the kids are going to love you, and the women are going to love you. And he'd have been fighting pussy off with a baseball bat, even with the mask. He would have, there's something special about him, but just he looks like a bus driver that sings like Pavarotti right now. So there's going to have to be some, and he's so green in this company, he's never going to learn. The hardest thing in wrestling now is learning the things that you shouldn't do. Because everybody used to teach you those before they taught you what you should do. And that's how everybody was on the same page and knew what the fuck they were doing. Now nobody teaches you what you shouldn't do. Especially in this company. Where did Mark Quinn go, by the way? Speaking of spectacular baby faces that could have made $1 million with the right training and the proper cultivation.
Tony seems to cycle the mid-card and lower guys off TV. Like they're there, they're nonstop. You see them in everything, and then they're gone for a month, 2 months, and then they pop up again. 2.0 and Daniel Garcia being a great example. The Matt Hardy crew being another example. For a month, there'll be an undercard crew that'll be on every show, and then the next month it's some other crew. So I'm sure they'll be back. I'm sure Mark Quinn will be cycled back in.
You don't keep any momentum that way on anybody that you want to legitimately do anything with, or somebody that you want to grow for the future. They can't just disappear. It's the opposite of how can I miss you if you won't go away is where the fuck did you go when I was just starting to talk to you? Anyway, did you see the main event of this program?
I just want to add my last comment. I enjoyed that last match, and I enjoyed Lio Rush at ringside. And Lio Rush, as soon as he comes out onto that stage, you'll want to hit him. I mean, he's great. I think he's so great in this role. And again, Dante, I don't know, because he smiled on the ramp. And I was like, there it is. He smiles. I don't know if he's just miserable because his brother's not there and Lio and him have a weird on-screen relationship. So I don't know, but I think the long-term plan is probably to get him back in a tag team with his brother, not to be a single star. Although I will say, and I don't remember much about his brother, we only saw him a few times, but Dante, there are a lot of guys there who do high flying, and Rey Fenix is pretty spectacular when he actually does stuff. Whether he hits it or not is another story. But Dante's spectacular at another level, and we've seen guys like Montez Ford and Mark Quinn who could jump really, really high. Dante jumps high, but it looks different. Yeah. It's almost like he floats on air at times. And I think he's really special, and in a sea of high flyers, he really stands out. So it'll be interesting to see, does the tag team help him or hurt him? That'll be interesting.
Well, and his brother's only, 2 years older than he is.
Yeah.
So it's not like that there's an experienced veteran leading the younger guy. If they do go back to the team, we'll see how that develops. But this guy clearly has something. You just got to channel it somehow.
Now, you asked me before about the main event, and I watched the promo to set up the main event, and then I had it on in the background, but I thought to myself, in order to watch this, I would have to be completely nuts, and not in the good way.
Well, I'm glad to know that we're going to get one of those in before that we have to talk about this, because no, in all seriousness, I might lose my appetite if I had to talk about the main event before we talk about this. We talk about Nuts.com being the best kept secret of savvy snackers around America.
Yeah.
And now new customers are going to get 10% off. Folks, the Nuts.com proclamations and endorsements and testimonials keep on flying in on Twitter, and you've seen them. As a matter of fact, Nuts.com, they have the great packaging, and they're so easy to take a picture of and tweet it out when you get your bag of nuts in. I've had a bunch of people tweet me pictures of their bags of nuts over the last several weeks, and I'll tell you what, some of these, I've never seen bags of nuts as big as some of these.
I heard Stan Lane had a whole photo album filled with.
As a matter of fact, he did. Of just that was actually the opposite of bags of nuts. But nevertheless, if you want to tweet these pictures of your nuts, folks, do them and do it, and we'll retweet your nuts all across America.
Yournuts.com for the record.
Yes, yournuts.com. But it's not yournuts.com. It's just nuts.com. So
yournuts.com order.
Of your nuts from nuts.com. Yes.
Okay, we could say it that way.
Yes. Well, that's what I was trying to say, but you keep dragging us into the gutter. But anyway, the people that have been tweeting the pictures because they're so happy when they get these delicious foods and snacks and products and various sundries delivered to their home from nuts.com. They make the perfect gift. It's coming up on holiday times. You can get ahead of holiday gifting. They've got customizable trays and a wide assortment of gifting options delivered in beautiful baskets. Nutritious, delicious, healthy nuts, dried flutes right next to that bag of nuts. Flours, grains, and so many other high-quality foods, raw, organic, roasted, salted, and candied nuts.
I understand Stan Lane has an album of photos of dried flutes as well.
No, but I'll tell you what, he was a seafood aficionado. You should have seen the Polaroids of those clams. You got the white chocolate toffee cashews. You got the honey sesame sticks, the dried mangoes from Nuts.com, not Stan Lane's photo album, folks. Nuts.com delivers fresher products than the supermarket. If you want to be like the Fink, good old Howard Finkel, he loved to nosh. Well, you can nosh on this stuff all day long. Delivery is fast. Most orders ship the same day you order them. You'll get them the next day. As we said, fresh as the morning dew. They've even got baking mixes and pasta and pantry items. Go to nuts.com and check out all the fine products. They've got over 4,000 products to choose from. And if you're a new nuts.com customer, if you're getting your hands on nuts for the very first time, then get 10% off your first order when you text EXPERIENCE. That's my show. EXPERIENCE to 64,000. That's EXPERIENCE to 64,000 to get 10% off your first order from nuts.com. And then we'll talk about the Clams Casino from Baltimore's Sabatino's. Terms apply. Available at nuts.com/terms.
Well, Jim, I can't speak too much in terms of firsthand knowledge about what was in Stan Lane's photo album and what wasn't, but I'm going to guess maybe photos of the main event of this show would not have been in his photo album.
Well, the funniest thing on the show was Mark Henry, because he does the interview for the main event, Brit Baker and Abandon, and he asks Abandon the question, and she just spits up all kinds of fake blood. Well, it looks like Abaddon has no comment. And in Britt Baker's, Reba and Jamie Hayter were dressed as zombies, and they had a trick-or-treat match between Britt Baker and Abaddon. And I'm sure that Abaddon would be very talented as an extra on The Walking Dead. The makeup was very Halloweenish and very professionally done. But, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, come on. You've got, again, Britt Baker, a popular heel. She's over. People love her. She's a heel. So why wouldn't they love her? But, gee, a garbage girls match on national television with a pudgy midget vomiting blood. And this went 2 segments. The first segment, Britt Baker just kept rolling out of the ring to get away from her, and then the heels pulled out a table from under the ring, which was the break spot. They did absolutely nothing. And when they come back, already Abaddon's got a chair, using it on Britt Baker in front of the referee because it's no DQ. Lazy booking. Then they left the chairs laying there and hit each other with phony-looking strikes, and then the heel stooges attacked Abaddon in front of the referee with more fake-looking work. Then Britt Baker goes to one of the big spots to give Abaddon a neck breaker off the apron of the ring onto a table, and the table didn't break. They just bounced off of it and slid to the floor.
Did she do that to Abaddon, or did Abaddon do that to her?
No, she did it to Abaddon. She was giving the neck breaker to Abaddon. It would have hurt both of them I'm sure it did, and it would have hurt both of them if it had worked right. So it would have been stupid. And then the heels figure, okay, the table was wobbly, that's why it didn't break. So the heel stooges hold the table while Britt Baker suplexes Abaddon onto the table, and it doesn't break again. And apparently that, from our testimonial earlier in the show, that's where the people started chanting, "Fuck the table." And
it looks more brutal. I mean, that's the other thing. The fans were kind of disappointed they didn't go through the table. It looks more brutal the way they bounced off it than if they actually did go through it.
Well, and also, was it Taz that said, it hurts worse when it doesn't break? Well, thanks. Now we've exposed that bit of business. It does hurt worse when the table doesn't break. But damn it. So I'm embarrassed for Britt Baker. She's having a garbage match with a freak gimmick that may be potentially, from what I saw, the worst worker on this roster. And then a aforesaid freak pulls a bag out from under the ring and dumps it in the middle of the ring, and it's thumbtacks. And okay, as entertaining as it was watching everything in this match not work properly, this is ridiculous, and I'm not watching fucking girls doing thumbtack spots. So, Tony, if you're wondering why the show lost by 400,000 viewers to a WWE show on a secondary network on the same night, and maybe it's because you put your women's champion in a garbage wrestling match against a fat midget in a cheap zombie costume. Just a thought, just an idea. If you are not already one of the, as we've demonstrated by the ratings, 500,000 to 1 million people on any given week that wants to watch garbage wrestling or goofy wrestling or cosplay wrestling or whatever it is that they give these people besides actual pro wrestling, then you might have liked this, but nobody else would, which is why nobody else is fucking watching it, because on every program since they, remember when they had Buzz a couple months ago? Danielson, Punk, Cole, look what's happened to him. The thought of Bray Wyatt, or the thought at one time of Ric Flair, or the thought of Charlotte, or the thought of all these other Steen, Generica, who knows? They can't keep it, because every time somebody else besides their base audience tunes in to see the people that they like or know who they are or want to see what the fuck's going to happen, they encounter kids in costumes playing or garbage wrestling with thumbtacks. And that runs them right back out the door. What'd you think?
I don't disagree with you. I think in terms of this specific match, there were many things I didn't like, but I'm sick of the thumbtacks and wrestling in general. Even if you like it, the fact that it's so overdone now defeats the purpose. We just saw Darby use them on his skateboard. And if that's going to be Darby's thing, don't have everyone else just whip them out whenever they have a garbage match on TV. I think this match was a waste of Brit Baker, who makes the best of every situation she's in.
Yeah.
And is tremendous. Reba may have been having too good a time, but she is obviously another one who could be a fill-in on The Walking Dead. She was practicing as hard as she
did. The makeup.
She did. Well, that's right. You know what? I didn't even think about that aspect of it.
She's very talented.
But I think a match like this, and we have to be honest, there are people who like this kind of match, but those kind of people aren't going to do anything to help AEW. And what I mean is, I think a match like this is counterproductive, even if it's at 10:30 at night on a Friday. I think there are certain matches that just turn people off. And, I don't know, and this isn't to take away anything from Abaddon, the person or anything, but I just think for a lot of people, what the gimmick is what the gimmick is. It's a kind of a disgusting horror thing that you may not want to see.
I'm not even talking about disgusting horror gimmicks. I'm talking about just any...
And then the match.
And phony wrestling with girls rolling around in thumbtacks. She did great on her makeup.
And then the match. And I just think, I don't know. I think this is counterproductive and it's a waste of Brit Baker. And also, we said it the other day because they just did stupid stuff on the other show and NXT just did stupid stuff. There was a day when wrestling promotions didn't need to do Halloween-themed comedy on their shows, let alone every show does something in the same week. That's the other thing. If you're going to do it on Dynamite, let Rampage just be the wrestling show that week. Or if you're going to do it on Rampage, let Dynamite end, a show that had really good wrestling by and large up and down the card and good promos, let that end on a serious note. But for both shows to end with this kind of crap, and it's different kind of crap than Young Bucks, but you know what I mean. Just a waste of Brit Baker, and I just think it's a counterproductive match.
And also the executive that greenlighted the original idea for AEW to be on TNT left, right? And has been replaced.
Kevin Riley, yeah.
Kevin Riley. And that doesn't... They have their second program, and they're going to switch networks at the first of the year, and they're going to do the specials, blah, blah, blah. But all it takes, as we've seen, as we've experienced in the Turner Broadcasting empire, whoever's running it, all it takes for the wrestling program to go away is somebody in a high-level position to say, I don't want to have this shit on my network, because it happened before. Even when they were making money, there were people like that there. Somebody high up in that organization is going to accidentally turn on their own network at Friday night at 10:30 or whenever at some point and see girls rolling around in thumbtacks. Whether it's real blood or fake blood or whatever was in this instance, they did the Brit Baker bloodbath before, but this was the gimmick blood. But the point is, some executive is going to call up and say, why are there girls rolling around in thumbtacks on our network? And were they real thumbtacks? And then somebody's going to, they'll check back. Yeah, they were real thumbtacks because they're that fucking stupid. And then we don't want this. So, and then we're paying for it? The last time that they canceled wrestling off of Turner Television, Turner owned the company. This time they're paying someone else for the programming that does 20 or 25% of the viewership that the wrestling, well, not even, less than that, of the wrestling program that they canceled 20 years ago. So why do shit like that to just fuck with chance and fate for no reason? Because nobody wants to see girls garbage wrestling. And if they do, as you mentioned, you don't want those people around.
Because, like, the best case scenario is the Brit Baker Thunder Rosa match. And that was too far for me. You know, this is where, whatever you want to say, it's uncomfortable sometimes when you see a Brit Baker with a face covered in blood. I don't want to see everyone with the Muda face. I don't. But that was kind of the match done as a hard-hitting, we could do this too, and we could do it really well.
And that was on pay-per-view, was it not?
No, that was on...
Nope.
I think it was Dynamite. And it became an issue because
what it was.
I think it turned off a lot of the female viewers, if I remember correctly. And then there's this, and this was even, I think, more problematic just because of the Abaddon look and the Halloween theme and the silliness and the makeup, and I don't know. And thumbtacks. If you didn't want to see Britt Baker land in the fucking thumbtacks. At least I didn't. And then she did. And I felt bad.
I don't feel bad when they do it to themselves. I feel bad for the business, and I feel bad for all, especially for the people with talent, whether guys or girls, that are like sitting there going like, okay, I can wrestle. But in the meantime, I'm sitting here while I'm watching the monitor with a fat, pudgy zombie rolling around in thumbtacks with my goddamn women's world champion.
Although I will say, the Mark Henry interview moment was pretty classic. Just, he was so happy. And he no-sold it completely, perfectly. It was so good. I like the interview a lot better than the fucking match.
Yes, if we could have just ended with the interview, that'd have been great. Well, I have no more comment on this program.
Well, that was the end of comment on AEW Rampage, but let's get all the reviews out of the way. Friday night also featured WWE's Smackdown, apparently not on Fox because my DVR did not record it and no one made a big deal about it like they did last week.
I accidentally, while flipping through the channel guide, saw that SmackDown was on FS1 again as it was 2 weeks ago and hit my DVR just an hour or so before the program started, so I got it. But don't worry, you didn't miss much. But again, just in case anybody didn't get the ratings information, SmackDown was up, I think, 100,000 or so from the last time it was on FS1, and Rampage was down 100,000 or so from the last time that they aired after SmackDown was on FS1. So Rampage got beat by 400,000 people. And this was not a good show, by the way, SmackDown.
I'm not surprised.
I know it's shocking news. Brock Lesnar wasn't on it. Roman Reigns wasn't on it.
What?
No. I'm going to tell you who was on it real briefly. The only segment that I've got any pleasure out of watching, or the only portion of the program, was first couple of segments with Charlotte Flair, who now, in my opinion, is the hottest heel in the business. Because not only do the fans hate her, but apparently the other girls hate her too. Because she looks like a star, she's good, and she knows it. And I got from her getting in the ring with her heel attitude that she basically doesn't give a shit that the other girls don't like her. The difference in how she carries herself is the difference in how Flair used to get in the ring versus a lot of the other guys. It's the difference of how Buddy Rogers used to get in the ring versus a lot of other guys. The difference of how the top guys carried themselves, came off when they spoke, were condescending.
Yeah,
now go ahead.
I was going to say, but Rick got along with the guys in the back.
Well, then he wasn't as good a heel as Charlotte is. And one thing she did that I really like, she mocked all the other girls that are all giddy over winning the belts, right? When she said, hey, I win these championships because I'm the best. I'm not excited about it. I don't expect anything else, basically is what she's saying. But all the other girls, oh, I've won the belt. Oh, I'm so giddy. And she said, these women need a leader, right? Because she's just debuted on SmackDown after coming over from whatever the fuck. And then Sasha Banks' music interrupted. And you know what she did wrong right off the bat, which I'm sure she's probably told to, and probably the others that did make the same mistake are told to. She made her normal entrance. The lighting, the dancing, the prancing, the poses, the mannerisms, the in-ring pose. Instead of coming out pissed off, there's already been bad blood here. She wants the belt that Charlotte's got. She makes her normal entrance. And then both girls in the ring talking to each other. They're standing sideways, talking to each other. They're standing facing the hard camera and turning their heads to talk to each other. And they're the only ones in the ring. So I lose the moment that I'm in when I'm digging what Charlotte's saying and she's coming off real and she's pissing off these people, and now we're back into sports entertainment. And then again, Charlotte, instead of wanting to give Sasha a title match, she thinks it's time. Well, paraphrasing what she said, she thinks it's time that a new face got a title shot. But what she said was, because they won't let people say title shot, she said, I think it's time a new face deserves a contender championship opportunity.
What is that?
It's nothing.
What kind of sentence is that? Oh, my God.
It's because nobody can figure out how to work championship opportunity because that's not a phrase that anyone would say. They can't figure out how to work it into a goddamn sentence. And then when she says a new face deserves the contender championship opportunity, guess whose music played, Brian?
Bianca Belair.
No.
Oh.
You are incorrect, sir.
Rhea Ripley.
You are incorrect, sir.
Nikki Ash.
You are incorrect, sir.
Who else is there? Nia Jax.
You are incorrect, sir.
Fuck, who else? Tamina.
You are incorrect, sir.
Natalia.
You are incorrect, sir.
Does anyone have a last name? Well, Becky Lynch, it wouldn't be. There's no way.
You are also incorrect.
I'm also incorrect. Liv Morgan.
You are incorrect, sir.
Fuck. Is it a new face?
You are incorrect, sir.
Fuck, it's an old face. Who's an old face that's there? Fuck. I've run out of.
I wish I had the Jeopardy music. Ding, ding.
Shayna Baszler.
You are incorrect.
Fuck. Carmella.
You are incorrect,
what
sir.
The fuck? Who? It wasn't. Shotzi Blackheart.
You are correct, sir. Here came Shotzi in a tank, and they've upgraded. She's got a bigger tank than she had. At least it looked that way. A bigger tank than in NXT. And I forgive you for not naming her immediately, because we gave up on her long ago in NXT when she ran the toy tank over the manager's leg and he laid under it grimacing.
Multiple
never
times.
Again.
Multiple times she ran him over.
And then backed up over it, yeah.
I actually forgot, just because I hadn't thought about her in a while. I don't think we've seen her on anything in a while. I forgot she was there, actually.
Well, that's because we don't watch Raw, and apparently she's been hiding out over there, I guess. But anyway, Shotzi wanted a title shot, and Charlotte said okay. And as soon as Charlotte agrees to it, Shotzi fires the cannon on her tank. What do they call the cannon on the tank? The tank gun or the...
Oh, I don't know.
whatever it is, she fired it, and the camera missed it, and nobody reacted. There was some kind of projectile. You could see it in the camera shot, and then it just left and traveled like an inch, and it was off screen. You heard the noise, boom, but nobody popped in the crowd. And when they cut to a shot of Charlotte in the ring, it must have missed her because she wasn't selling it. So
she probably wouldn't sell it anyway.
She wouldn't sell it anyway. So now we got Charlotte and Shotzi, and I wrote, now I got to watch this fucking match. I'm going to see what the fuck's going on here. Charlotte is a heel. She actually works. This stuff makes sense. It's not just about doing moves. She doesn't just go out and do moves. She works. She is a heel. She has attitude. I don't know about Shotzi's offense, but she sells well. However, if I'd have watched this after I watched Abaddon and Brit Baker, I would have had a whole new Shotzi would have been Mildred Burke here. Her comeback was a little odd in the first segment. They went 2 segments, but she made a little comeback. It was a little odd. But then Sasha.
Oh, they went right to the match?
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was just a promo when she came out. I didn't realize they went to a match.
Yeah, no, they're right there. That's why I said now I got to fucking watch it. They hooked me. And their break spot was Sasha Banks is out there. Obviously, she's been out there, so she's milling about. And she distracted Charlotte on the floor so that Shotzi could do a dive from inside the ring out onto Charlotte, right? And poor old Shotzi went straight head first and arms first, well, like Superman going out the window between the second and third rope. And there was Charlotte. And Charlotte, if you go back, you even say Charlotte gave her the, okay, go ahead, right? The little head nod while she was distracted by Sasha, and Shotzi took off, and Charlotte is standing right there in the perfect place, right? And she ain't moved. And right as Shotzi comes, Charlotte turns and she's ready for the catch. And shot both of Shotzi's feet, hooked the top rope on the way through, and she went straight out and straight down. Right in front. Charlotte it was like she was trying to catch apples in a barrel, trying to lean over and get under this girl, and it just hit the floor. Boom. So that was the break spot.
Haven't we seen Shotzi, am I wrong, in NXT? Didn't we see her hit the floor hard a few times?
We've seen all these people hit the floor hard a few times.
Well, that's true, too. That's true.
So anyway, after they come back from the break, apparently Shotzi was okay because now she's Hurricane Rana-ing Charlotte off the top rope and got a big pop for a 2 count. And then Charlotte came back and hit a big boot on Shotzi and knocked her off the apron of the ring, jumped over the top to the floor, which was impressive, like she's going after her, but as she landed, Shotzi super kicked her, threw her back in and got a 2 count. They had the people at this point. And actually, the second half of this thing was pretty daggum good. The first segment was a little dodgy. Charlotte went for the figure 8, but Shotzi small packaged her for a 2 count, got a nice pop on that. The problem is, Charlotte's one of these people that the way she goes into the figure 4 is backwards from how you should small package somebody. So it's a little dodgy there. Shotzi got another 2 count, got a little nice pop. And then Charlotte went to the top for a moonsault, but Shotzi rolled out of the way and moved, so Charlotte landed on her feet and did another standing moonsault and got a 2 count. They were really cooking now. I'm like, okay. This is, if Shotzi dumped the fucking tank, I could maybe get into some Shotzi. Then Shotzi kicked Charlotte. Charlotte's going for the figure 4 as she steps over the leg, right? Shotzi puts the boot on her butt and pushes her forward. But Sasha Banks apparently was supposed to be up on the apron. But she wasn't. She was standing on the floor because when Charlotte goes toward the ropes, she stops about 4 or 5 feet in front of the ropes. Like, oh, there's Sasha standing on the floor. Why would she have? Now Sasha gets up on the apron where she probably was supposed to be to begin with. Then As Charlotte and Sasha are face to face, Charlotte suddenly moves to the side and goes to the turnbuckle. And once she does that, then Shotzi starts running, but holds up so that she doesn't hit Sasha because she was going to try to hit Charlotte, but Charlotte had already moved before Shotzi got. You see where I'm going with this, right?
I think so.
They're just all flummoxed up, and then Charlotte sucker punched Shotzi from the side while she was holding up so she didn't hit Sasha, and then Charlotte hit the natural selection. Boom, 1, 2, 3. It was a good match overall. It was a great second half. It was a little sloppy in the first part. It was an awkward bullshit finish that nobody was in the right spot for, and I don't think that it would have come off that great if they'd have done it like they were supposed to do it. But however, while this was not the best WWE women's match that I have ever seen, I don't remember many AEW women's matches being this good. And if they were, it involved either Brit Baker, Thunder Rosa, or Serena Deeb. So, and then for whatever reason, after that finish, maybe, who knows, maybe it was Sasha's fault, but Shotzi was mad at Sasha and just jumped her and kicked the teetotal shit out of her inside and outside the ring for about 5 minutes straight. So now she's a heel. But I was just starting to say, well, that Shotzi, not a bad baby face. And then she does everything but take a chainsaw and a disemboweling hook to fucking Sasha. So there you go.
So does that mean Charlotte's done with her?
I have no idea. I have no earthly idea what's going on here. It just, there was a brief moment in time where these girls were having a good match. But then we got the Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar crown jewel recap and last week's SmackDown and, you know, the attack on Brock or the attack on Adam Pearce by Brock Lesnar. The great stuff. It actually registered. I remembered seeing every bit of this from last week, which normally everything you see, because it's all the same and it's nothing's ever allowed to breathe, it just blows by you. But I remembered all of these things. And I remembered Pierce suspending Brock and then Brock fucking him up and ripping his pants. And then they come to a sit-down statement from Adam Pearce where he not only is Brock still suspended indefinitely, but after further festering on this thing, further stewing about it, he fined Brock $1 million. Adam Pearce did a very good job of delivering this verbiage.
This unrealistic verbiage.
He had a straight face and he seemed suitably hurt both emotionally and physically at what happened last week, but he might have as well have said, I have decided that we're going to put Brock Lesnar in a space capsule and shoot him into the sun. And it would have been just as the same delivery, and it would have been just as equally believable. $1 million. That
was one of those things I remember when I was a kid as a fan. That whenever there was a battle royal on a small show, they're like, $20,000 to the winner. It's like, no, $20,000, where's that coming from?
You know who did, but here's the thing. The people that did that primarily were Vern Gagne and Vince McMahon Sr. They had the big, when they did the battle royals in the Southern Territories, especially in the weekly towns of people, you know, at that time, $20,000 in the 70s, fuck, as we'll talk about later on. That was a little bit ridiculous. But the Southern Territories would talk about the entry fee. If you had 20 wrestlers, each one of them would put up $500. So there would be $10,000 prize money. You lost your prize money you lost your entry fee if you didn't win. If you won, you got the whole thing. And then sometimes the promoter would match it. So then it was somewhat more believable. And on spot shows, I've seen battle royals for $1,500. And then you had battle royals where it was $1 a pound. So that when you had Andre the Giant or you had Haystacks Calhoun or whatever, and they had to pay more because they stood a better chance of winning it. It was explicable. It was reasonable. It wasn't just, the winner of this, Vern Gagne, didn't he do $50,000 2-ring battle royals?
That sounds right.
And this was in the 70s. And you're like, what the fuck? Even when you're seeing 10,000 people in an arena, whenever they know everybody only paid $5 to get in, that was the ticket price at that time. So there's a way to do it. But $1 million ain't it. And then here's the Heyman is in the back, right, watching on the monitor. And he reacts kind of with a facial to the $1 million announcement. But then Caleb Braxton comes up and asked how he thought that Brock would respond to this. And he said, well, I'll tell you how Roman Reigns would respond. He would show up and he'd wreck everybody and he'd do that. But he doesn't have to do that because he beat Brock Lesnar. Well, but Paul answered the question, how would Brock respond? And this was the best part, because then Paul starts getting wound up. Say, oh, Brock? Well, if it was Brock, he'd go to the office and he'd rip everybody's neck out and he would do this and that. And he started talking about what a beast Brock was. And then he caught himself as he works himself up, and then he catches himself and he calms down and he said, but of course, I haven't spoken to Brock Lesnar. So we still don't know. We don't know what the fuck's going on and blah, blah, blah. But that was the Heyman, Reigns, Lesnar business for the show. I guess they're not going to waste Brock on FS1 when they know that they're going to beat the competition by 400,000 viewers anyway.
Yeah, how many dates do they have on Brock right now?
I think it's past the point of dating. I think they're engaged at this point.
Watch out, Sable.
Real briefly on the rest of the program, Xavier Woods is now the king of the ring, and he's already affecting a half-ass Booker T English accent. He's not going all the way Madonna with it, but he's speaking in proper verbiage, and he's not dropping his G's and things. And he made Kofi Kingston Sir Kofi. And this was way more ridiculous and a lot longer than it sounds. And then the Usos came out and sucker punched Kofi and left. And then they had a match, a trick or street fight, in a ring filled with pumpkins and kendo sticks between Booger and Shaky Nakamura against Madcap Moss and Happy Corbin, the Giggle Twins. And then they were going to have a match between Naomi and Shayna Baszler, but Cruella DeVille came out and made herself the referee. And, of course, we know she hates Naomi because she's beaten Naomi up a week or two ago. How can she keep her spot blatantly being a heel? If you're a evil member of management and you're trying to fuck the person that you don't like over, shouldn't you do it surreptitiously, behind the scenes, burying people in private like everybody else in the WWF has always done, instead of blatantly being a heel and a member of management at the same time and just beating people up?
Well, right now, they're down a person with Adam Pearce injured, so she can kind of get away with a little extra. Plus, as we all know, it's very difficult to find a good, talented wrestling executive, so maybe they just want to give her a little leeway.
Well, that's true. And Disney is on her heels. I'm telling you, she will make $1 million in the live-action 101 Dalmatians. But so anyway, as the referee, she quick counted Naomi within seconds, and then Shayna Baszler choked her out. And, of course, as we mentioned, it's the wrong kind of heat when the promotion itself endorses crookedness against your favorite wrestlers. And then the main event was the Usos against King Woods and the Earl of Kingston, or whatever his name is. And after that was over, Pat McAfee had the best sign-off in the history of wrestling. Baseball's stupid. We'll be back on Fox next week.
Baseball's better, has better booking, better action, and fans that care.
I forgot. I hit a nerve there with you on that.
Because baseball's better than WWE.
Hey, all I know is I used to cuss the Atlanta Braves like redheaded stepchildren when I would
Me too.
when I would be either in a hotel room waiting for the Atlanta show to come on, or when I would be home watching my VHS tape that I'd recorded of whatever show we were going to be on, and I would get 20 minutes of Atlanta fucking Braves instead of the first 20 minutes of my wrestling program, I would cuss. But now I have a feeling I would stand up and applaud the baseball game that ran over and kept me from watching the wrestling program.
There's better storylines. There's better long-term storylines. There's better short-term storylines. They break out new stars all the time. Some of the moves that the booker makes don't work out. A guy will get a hit off the relief pitcher. Some of them do work out. The drama, the tension, it builds. It's so much better than anything Vince McMahon could do right now.
Baseball been very, very good to you.
Baseball has been very, very good to me. And you know what else has been very, very good to me?
What's that?
My car, because I have nothing to fear. If anything goes, if I need a part, if I need multiple parts, there's one place I can go. And of course, I know them because of this show. It's rockauto.com.
That's exactly right. And if you go to rockauto.com, you can get any part that your car will ever need. But then you'd have to figure out how to put it on, Brian, and there's where you'd have to find the rub. But a lot of folks are available and able to do their own repairs, and they like a quality, reliable, easy-to-navigate place to find all the parts they need, and that's the rockauto.com catalog in a nutshell. It's unique. It's remarkably easy to navigate. You can quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle. And the best of all, prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and the same for both professional mechanics and the do-it-yourselfers. Why should you get raked over the coals and sodomized with a rusty fishing knife just because you're not a professional mechanic? You should have the same opportunity as everyone else in this country to buy a quality crankshaft at the same price as some highfalutin mechanic fella. Well, at rockauto.com, they recognize your God-given freedoms to buy blinker fluid at affordable and competitive prices. Chain stores have different price tiers. They do not at rockauto.com. They offer the lowest price possible rather than changing prices based on what the market will bear. Rockauto.com is for everybody and does not require membership. So you don't have to be a card-carrying rockauto.com member. Anybody can go through their doors. You don't have to worry about an account login. As a matter of fact, you can just walk up and carry this shit off without paying for it.
No. That's not even... Why would you say that?
It's almost like that. I mean, they're so kind to their customers. It's just like being given charity. Anyway,
that should never enter your mind, ladies and gentlemen. Rock Auto has great deals that you're going to be happy to support because they are such great deals.
Yes, rockauto.com is a family business, serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. And they carry parts from hundreds of manufacturers. It's an amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com is the folks that you need to go to not be walking down the side of the interstate at 3 o'clock in the morning because your car's in a ditch somewhere because you didn't do the maintenance on it. And then where will you be? I'll tell you where you'll be. You'll be in up shit creek without a paddle. Do you want that? And then when you're walking down the side of the interstate, some drunk at 4 in the morning is not going to know you're there and he's going to run you over. Then you're dead. Where will you be then? You'll be in a horrible position being dead. Then what will your family do? They'll be out in the streets. They'll be broke and busted. Penniless. Possibly your wife will become an alcoholic and turn to prostitution. Jesus. Your children will grow up uneducated and lead lives of crime themselves, playing penny ante poker in back alleys and flipping dice and things, all because you didn't maintain your fucking car. You no good prick. I'm glad you're dead.
Jesus Christ. You know, I didn't think you were going to be able to top the encouraging of theft. And then you did by wishing death to the listener.
I didn't wish it. It's just I'm glad he's dead. He got run over on the side of the road because he didn't maintain his car, and he sent his kids to prison and his wife to a life of sordid dissipation.
Sordid dissipation,
Sordid dissipation.
All right.
Why do that? Go to rockauto.com, and when you do, Write JCE in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. JCE in the How Did You Hear About Us box. Tell them what you think of us.
I'm pretty sure they'll know that. They'll know all about this, but Jim...
No, when people try to climb in the... Well, I guess you can't climb in the window of their website. When people try to carry their products off, they'll know we sent them there.
All right. Well...
RockAuto.com.
That's right. But Jim, you said you had a big classic wrestling topic you wanted to discuss, and we didn't really go over it before the show, so I'm not sure what it is, and I'm really curious, and I'm sure the listeners are as well.
Hold on, I'm trying to find my notes. I got my email here. I got an email from Mark Cole up in Delaware. He is a longtime Cult of Cornette member and does a fine publication, Odessa Steps magazine. And he had been watching, I guess, one of the clips that we had done talking about the scaffold match at Starrcade. And he says, in the past, you've mentioned that the boys and or the office would help compensate guys when they were out injured, like Barry Darso's knee injury, or in the worst case scenario, chipping in for Magnum after the accident. So Mark goes on, you said you only missed 2 weeks after the knee surgery following Starrcade. Did you get any help those 2 weeks of missed dates? From Bobby, Dennis, and Bubba? From the Warriors? From the office? Thanks as always. And this, I can see coming up to Hawk and Animal and Paul, hey, can you kick me in something for the next couple of weeks? What the fuck? I've told this story before, but this brings up more background that I have not possibly told before. Yes, when I blew the knee on the scaffold match, the next day drove immediately back. I didn't drive. Thankfully, my wife at the time was with me because I couldn't walk, and I was in the back seat with my knee on a pillow because every pothole sent horrible pain through me, and the knee was 4 times the size that it was supposed to be. But immediately went back to Charlotte and got it drained, and the orthopedic guy that we had in Charlotte at the time, Dr. Istwanik, was Joe, what was his name? I think Joseph Istwanik. But anyway, he had a orthopedic clinic there, and he had done a lot of the guys in Charlotte at the time. And a guy who was in his clinic named Dr. Oweda is the one who did my knee. And he said, yeah, we got to do a surgery. It's so big, we can't even tell whether you've torn the ligament or not. We think, but it's so swollen, we got to drain it. We got to go in and clean it up and do the whole thing. Okay, so the next day I immediately went in and had that done. And that's when they told me, best case, you'll be able to go back in 2 or 3 weeks. Well, we were only 2 weeks away from the Christmas break. And that's why I mentioned that I went back for the weekend before the Christmas break on crutches. We went to Chicago, the debut at the Rosemont Horizon, Midnight and Road Warriors, Flair and Dusty did a $150,000 house, and taped Atlanta TV that weekend. And I think that was our debut in Minneapolis. No, it wasn't Minneapolis debut that same weekend, but it was a big weekend. We made like $4,000 in 3 days. This was 35 years ago. So, and then I had another period of time during the Christmas break to recuperate. But as far as financially, do you remember me telling this story, Brian, or have I told it with you around? Do you know what I got paid for the 2 weeks that I was off after blowing my knee on the scaffold match?
I don't recall what you were paid, no.
Zip. Zero. Zilch. The Midnight Express made $7,000 each over the next 2 weeks while I was sitting at home with my knee up in bed. And I would have made the same thing, but since I didn't make any of the towns, I didn't get paid. And I'll tell you more about the insurance we had in a second, but basically the insurance I had a $1,500 deductible, and I missed out on $7,000 over the next 2 weeks. So I got paid $10,000 for the scaffold, and I profited $1,500.
Now, if I could bring up, because this is right after Magnum TA's accident, that was a case where the boys did contribute money to Magnum TA, correct?
Well, yes. And it's a different
scenario altogether.
It's a different scenario, and that's where I was going with this. I was only out 2 weeks, right? Now, having said that, it would have been lovely if anybody had thought, hey, like Jimmy Crockett, Hey, Cornette just fucking dropped off that scaffold and blew his knee, and he's had surgery. Maybe we ought to pay him half pay or whatever for the next couple of weeks that he's out. Honestly, that was the first time that I had ever been injured and had to miss a day in the wrestling business. In Mid-South Wrestling, I had a staph infection once, and I missed like 6 days that year altogether because I was sick. And that was unusual because I missed 5 all at the same time because in 84, we had worked 100 days in a row, all of us, everybody on the roster. And a couple of guys came down with mono, and Terry Taylor was out for fucking 6 weeks. Your immune system starts shutting down and shit. And I believe, because I caught mono at Channel 3 in Shreveport where we did interviews, they had an old-fashioned Coke machine that came out with bottles. And I believe that I accidentally drank after Terry Taylor at interviews because I got mono like 3 days later, and they had just found out he had it. And he was out, like I said, for 6 weeks. I took 6 days off and came back and said, fuck it, if I die, I die.
When was that in 84?
That was September-ish, October-ish. I don't have my book in front of me. Somewhere in the fall of 84. I did promos one Wednesday and then went home and went to bed and showed up at TV the next Tuesday. And that's a pretty big turnaround for fucking mono, or a pretty good turnaround, rather.
If I could stop you just for a second on this, because everyone knows Bill Watts' reputation, and you said you worked 100 days in a row, and everyone knew if you went there, you worked. What did you do when you knew you couldn't go? Do you call them up and tell them that? Who do you call, and is it a difficult call?
Dundee. If I'd have called Bill Watts and said, Bill, I've just had both of my legs severed in a train accident. He said, well, just make an appearance. Okay. But I told Dundee, I said, the doctor has just told me to go to bed. It was literally so bad that I would get up in the morning and meet the boys and get in the car to go to the town, and I'd be asleep 30 minutes later like I had been up for 3 days. I couldn't almost walk around. I was dizzy every time I was standing up and whole 9 yards. And plus, it was contagious. So when you're contagious, they okay, stay away, right? So if you're ever going to get anything in the wrestling business and you want to take off time, but you don't want too much heat, get something that's contagious. But anyway, so that was that. But the point is, at the Starrcade match, that's the first time I'd ever been injured and had to miss a show. And so, I'm just shitting because I'm like, I wasn't thinking about the checks that I was missing. I was thinking about the towns I was missing. These are big towns. They're important. They're big matches. Ah, shit. And Bobby and Dennis afterwards, they said, well, did Crockett send you a check? I said, no. You ought to say something. I was like, because I was happy to be there. I mean, my God. Hold on. I won't even do the inflation calculator. The money we made in 1986 is equivalent to approximately $600,000 today. So I'm going to bitch about 2 weeks, right? And I was scared. I didn't want to get heat. I'm still new. Having said that, the next summer, I tore my left ACL in Philadelphia right before the Great American Bash Tour. Missed the Atlanta Bash because I had to have surgery again. I took, 10 days off that time, came back on crutches. And that time I went to Jimmy Crockett. I said, Jimmy, he said, oh, we'll take care of you. So basically, they gave me, I think, about half of what I would have made to work the towns for that time in person, except a couple of towns were the shit, so I didn't get any payoff at all for those. And I didn't have to go. So it was something.
Did you reference the previous time when you talked to him? Did you say?
Yes. Did? I said, Jimmy, last year I missed out on 2 weeks of big checks because I was in a hospital and I was at home. I said, here's the same thing again. The bash is coming up. He said, oh, we'll take care of you. So like it's half price. But the point is, Mark was asking about Darso and Magnum, and I've told this story before, but for the new listeners, and just to recap, it was early that year, spring of 86. Darso he'd been going to do a clothesline on a guy off the top rope on Atlanta TV, just a simple diving clothesline off the top, and landed with his leg under him. And the same doctor did my knee, did his, and said it looked like a hand grenade went off in his knee. He tore everything. And he was out, I'm pretty sure, for about a year. And at the time, he had just gotten married, I think, or he either had a dedicated girlfriend or they just got married. He had just been doing well for Crockett for the last, year, whatever, since he'd come in from Mid-South. And all the guys liked him. And he, didn't have a lot of savings. So going to be out of work for a year. And because he had to have the whole ACL reattachment and everything. I didn't have mine reattached. I just had it cleaned out. I didn't have to fucking be 300 pounds and wrestle, right? So he had all the work done, and all the guys that worked for Crockett agreed to chip in, oh God, was it $25 out of each of their checks every week, or was it $50? Whatever. So when you had 25 or 30 guys doing that, and then Crockett agreed to match whatever the total was that the wrestlers chipped in. So for the year, whatever that he was off, that we all did that, he was able to make, what was it, 12, 13, 1400 bucks a week, and, pay his bills and everything.
Who organized that? Who spoke up for him?
I don't even remember. It's something, it came from either the boys or maybe even Dusty. But no, probably the boys, because Crockett said, the boys' suggestion was first, because Crockett then agreed to match it. But I just remember that somebody came around and said, hey, everybody, we're all going to do this, right? And got everybody on board. I don't know who the first person to utter that idea would have been. But so then with Magnum's accident, it was the same thing that happened in October that year. The guys they didn't know whether he'd ever be able to wrestle again, but they knew that suddenly he's got no income. So we did the same thing. And that's why in the Midnight Express book, some of the paycheck receipts or stubs that I had printed says transfers Magnum. And it was $25 or whatever, because that was every week out of everybody's check. They would take that amount of money for Magnum and Crockett would match it. And here's something else that they did in Charlotte, and this goes to show you, again, when Vince McMahon, $1 billion company, or even Tony Khan now or whatever, when they say that you can't make wrestlers employees, they have to be independent contractors. For most promotions, that is correct, as we've mentioned, especially in the territory days, but the logistics and the bookkeeping and the expense and everything, except for Vince McMahon and potentially Tony Khan, because he's got the money, he just doesn't have the organization. Most wrestlers should always have been classified independent contractors. But one of the ladies in Crockett's office, on their direction, went out and got a group insurance plan for the boys. It didn't cover you wrestling in the ring, but it covered you for medical expenses. If you got fucking brain cancer, or you had a heart attack, or you were in a car wreck, or your family, it was real medical insurance at a group rate that just didn't cover the wrestlers actively wrestling in the ring. And there's ways around that I'll talk about in a second. It was called Carolina Entertainers because they went to this insurance company and they made the claim that not only do these guys wrestle, but they do these charity shows, they do these fundraising things. You've seen the footage of the Charlotte babyfaces, Luger and Dusty and all those guys playing the police at a basketball game for charity in Charlotte.
Yeah, 88.
Yeah, and and personal appearances at car shows and things. So they sold the insurance company that these guys are entertainers and they make personal appearances. They do charity things. So it would cover them and their families if they signed up to the group deal, just not wrestling. So in 1987, for example, when I tore my ACL, I was in the process of kicking Ricky Morton in Philadelphia. So when I reported it to my insurance company, I said I tore my ACL while kicking a ball with a friend rather than kicking a friend in the balls. It was just,
Dennis would be proud.
Yes, and also when I went in to have the surgery after her Starrcade, I said I fell off a scaffold. I did. I didn't say it was in a wrestling match, and who would have thought to ask?
Hold on, now stop. When you get admitted to the hospital, I never thought about this before. And they say, "What happened to you?" And you say, "I fell off a scaffold."
Mm-hmm.
Did anyone say you don't seem like the kind of man that would be on top of a scaffold? Did anyone say anything?
No, because I've got a fucking white gown and a goddamn little fucking bonnet on and I'm naked underneath it, and I'm on a gurney being wheeled into surgery. I look like every other schlub.
I meant when you were first admitted. When you were admitted.
Well, the doctor knew what was going on. They don't care. They're going to get their money from the insurance company. The insurance company wasn't watching television. And the doctor knew what I did. He's worked on all the boys. But anyway.
But they could have, like a nurse could have called the cops and said, "There's a man, something clearly happened to him, but he's lying. He's making up some story that he fell off a scaffold."
They were going to call
But somebody
the cops.
broke his legs.
This is insurance fraud. It's not a criminal offense. Anyway. This was like 80-something bucks a month for medical insurance back then in this group rate. And that's what Crockett's office did for the boys. It's not like that turned him into Mother Teresa, but something was done. And the only reason that it wound up was we still had that after Crockett sold to Turner, because the people that were in the group, it wasn't tied to Crockett Promotions. It was that particular group that had bought the insurance. What doomed it was by the time that Crockett sold to Turner, and then Turner a few months later turned a lot of things over, almost everybody in the group was gone, except for me and the Midnight Express and like 2 or 3 other people that had been there from the start. So it fell by the wayside. But at least then you could do something like that. And I don't know why it's undoable now, but nobody seems to be doing it, because you're either an employee or you're completely on your own. But anyway, if you don't have any follow-up questions on that, it made me think of something else that ties into a lot of the fans. A lot of them are interested in how guys got paid, what they got paid, how the shows ran behind the scenes, what the finances were, promoters making money. I've said that when you were a wrestling promoter in the territory days, it was practically a license to print money, and there was plenty of ways wrestlers could lose money, almost no ways that an established promoter could. But it made me think of something else. But any follow-ups to this first? Did I answer Mark's question adequately?
I think so, and I asked most of my follow-ups. More questions will probably come to me as we keep talking about this. This is interesting stuff, though. And
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do you think you'd have been better off those 2 weeks at home learning a new trade like coding?
Now we can't even pitch to it without starting to laugh. Folks, before we go any further, let's stop down for a second and think about how we can reevaluate our priorities. For example, there I was in a dead-end job, injured at home, not making any money, didn't know what my prospects were. This was 1986. That was 35 years ago. Who knew whether I would ever draw another dime from the wrestling industry or not? Maybe when I was laying there in that bed recovering from surgery, I should have thought about a career change at that point when I got stiffed on that $7,000. And I could have saved myself making literally millions of dollars since then. If I'd have changed my career then, I could have saved myself that burden. But folks...
Well, you could have made millions more, potentially.
Well, I could have made millions more because I would have been in those shadow governments in those third world countries.
Oh, not this again. No, there's none of that with coding, with Code Academy.
We established that this is not the kind of code that you have to memorize and then eat the paper.
No.
That is not the kind of code they teach at Code Academy. Also, it is not the kind of code that you use to overthrow governments. That's right. We established that as well, right?
Well, for the record, it actually is exactly probably the code the coding skills that you learn here probably could be applied to overthrowing a government.
now wait a minute.
But it's not like you're directly being taught this, and that really shouldn't be your mindset. I can't lie to the listeners. I mean,
you took the piss out of me last week, and I was right, folks. If you want to be part of the revolution of code writers around the world that are going to take over governments left and right and bring people to their knees, if you want to be like the guy that hacked on Sinclair Broadcasting and wiped out all their shit, if you want to be somebody that extorts millions of dollars from people that you've never even met, go to the fine folks at Codecademy. Folks, there's never been a better time to become a programmer, because think of all of those governments out there around the world waiting to fall. Whether you're starting from scratch, looking to advance, or possibly wanting to take over a nice South Sea island, Codecademy can help you reach your coding goals. Learning to code might be the easiest way to change your career, and I know it's definitely one of the easiest ways to conduct ransom from foreign governments. Simply put, Codecademy is the way to learn code online. They not only teach you job-ready coding skills, but also help you build unique projects for your portfolio. You can earn certificates and even prep for technical interviews. You can also establish bugs and what do they call them? Those, the worms or the malware.
No,
inside.
Don't even encourage that. What do you?
Oh, well, no, they don't. They might teach you, but don't tell anybody if they teach you.
They do not teach you how to install malware.
Oh, well, get qualified for in-demand jobs in as little as 2 months. Even quicker if you've got enough to hang over the guy's head. Learn at your own pace and your own level and choose what to learn or what you want to learn. Refuse to learn things you don't agree with. They'll let you do it all here. You can build websites, analyze data, analyze websites and build data. You can learn coding languages, Python, HTML, Sys, SQL, and JavaScript. Not sure where to begin? I'll begin again. Python, HTML, Sys, SQL, and JavaScript. You can get instant feedback. Remember, some of the feedback is negative, like get off my leg. But other instant feedback could be positive, like more of that on the left. Your code is tested as soon as you submit it. So you always know if you're on the right track, folks. You'll get tools and cheat sheets. You'll get cheat sheets from tools. You'd have to be a real tool to give somebody a cheat sheet. And you can get help from other learners in the forum or connect with people near you, like-minded people in your local Codecademy chapter. You'll learn the codes of how to get in these secret forbidden doors that hide the meetings that these Codecademy chapters conduct under cover of darkness. So, folks, if you want to land your dream job in web development, programming, computer science, data science, or government overthrow, join the millions of people learning to code with Codecademy and see where coding can take you. And you get 15% off your Codecademy Pro membership when you go to Codecademy.com and use the promo code EXPERIENCE. That's promo code EXPERIENCE at Codecademy.com to get 15% off Codecademy Pro, the best way to learn code. And whoever is the first member of the cult of Cornette to take over a government and bring a democracy to its knees while using this code, I want to be the prime minister.
That's what I was afraid of while you're talking about all this. Someone's going to do something crazy like take over Ecuador. And they're going to say, why did you do this? Jim Cornette, gringo.
Hey, there you go. Then I can have a statue of me down in Ecuador.
That would be an interesting thing, a tourist attraction, of course. But let's get back to your tourist attraction through wrestling history.
Well, anyway, it's not really through wrestling history, but the previous question of, guys not getting paid when they did work and everything. And in my warped mind, it brought me to another subject because so many people today go, well, all the old wrestling, the guys didn't make shit and it was all small time and now the big money and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of the guys from those days perpetuated the idea they didn't make a lot of money. Some of them didn't make a lot of money. Others like to lie about it. But it hit me watching these television shows that we watched this past week and then thinking about those days and looking at records and etc. The entire wrestling business today better be glad that they don't have to sell tickets, because nobody is. Nobody. And because a lot of people are wondering, well, why didn't they pay guys when they didn't go to the show? Because that's where the promotions made all their money, was at the house shows, and that's where the guys made all their money. That was the money. Ticket sales was the money in wrestling. Nobody was getting paid for their television program, except Memphis got $1,500 a week. There may have been an odd arrangement for a few hundred here and there. Also, nobody was paying any appreciable money for production either. The TV station loved to have the show because a lot of people watched it, and the promotion loved to have the show because it promoted all of their live events where they made all their money. So there was no budget for just paying a guy to, well, we'll keep you around for, 6 weeks and just do TV. The lowest payoffs were for the TV tapings. If you were a job guy, you actually got more than the main event stars, because the main event stars in a lot of territories didn't get paid for television at all. And in other places, like Mid-South Wrestling, they got $40, which basically covered your hotel and dinner at that point in time. And that's what the stars got for TV, because it was all geared to house shows. And I know that the fans that are used to modern wrestling think that, oh, well, look, they sold 8,000 tickets in Boston, or, wow, the big sellout and such. That's not a lot of tickets, and it's only once in a while. When you talk about the repetition and the large numbers of tickets that were sold to pro wrestling in any previous generations, up until the last 20, 25 years, it dwarfs what's going on now. And so that's why guys worked hurt, or guys bent over backwards to make the show, because that's how they got paid. And also for a lot of people who say, well, how much did you get for going to North Wilkesboro, North Carolina? Well, $125. Well, geez, they pay $200 or $300 now for the opening match guys on this or that independent. Well, besides the fact this was 30, 40 years ago, that was one night of your week. You were wrestling 7 nights a week in a lot of cases, and multiple times on some weekend days. So these figures added up. And we've talked about the big shows, St. Louis. We've talked about big money. I just saw a thing on Gene Kiniski from the Maple Leaf Gardens Twitter account that said Kiniski, he got hot in Toronto and Buffalo in the Midwest in 1957, had a huge year, and he made $89,000. And that was his best year until he became the NWA World Champion in 1966. $89,000 in 1957 is the equivalent of over $800,000 today. And Gene Kiniski wasn't the highest paid guy in wrestling then. But while we've talked about a lot of the big towns, the St. Louises and the Torontos and the Gates and the payoffs, and we've mentioned where we have Sam Muchnick's ledger sheets and see that you could make $6,000 defending the NWA World Title in St. Louis 40 years ago. Nobody looks at the spot shows. So I thought it would be fun, Brian, to take a look at just any territory from 1980. Let's say a nice round number, 40 years ago. That's right when I was getting in the business. It's right before I became a performer, but I was still a photographer. I knew what the merchandise stands were taking in. I knew how much the tickets were and how many people were buying them. So let's take a look at a spot show in 1980 from any average territory, just a small town. And let me illustrate why being a wrestling promoter in those days was often a license to print money. Okay?
Yeah, I'd like to hear this because
right.
I've seen plenty of wrestling promoters who can't figure out how to turn the printing press on.
Well, okay, in 1980, let's say you ran a spot show in Hohenwald, Tennessee, or Rabbit Ridge, Kentucky, or anywhere in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, wherever there was a territory, which was everywhere, except for Vern Gagne wasn't into really running a lot of the small towns. He only ran 15, 16 days a month back in those days. And Vince McMahon Sr. had already graduated to mostly bigger buildings at that point, but almost every other territory had their main towns, and then they would run what we call spot shows. And those are shows in little towns that you go to once a year, maybe twice a year, maybe not that often. You find a local sponsor, an athletic team at the local high school, or a civic group that wants to get part of the gate in return for doing the advertising, providing the venue, and you advertise it on your TV, and that keeps the guys working 7 nights a week. So let's say it's a Wednesday or a Thursday in 1980, and your tickets, it's territory wrestling then, so let's say they're $5 on average. And let's say you draw 1,000 people. And now a lot of people are going to say, wow, how are you going to draw 1,000 people in Hohenwald, Tennessee? By the way, Hohenwald actually worked in Hohenwald. They called it Hole in Wall, and also announced in Rabbit Ridge, Kentucky one night. But I have here, when I got into business in 1983, I just flipped through my 1983 book. I was in Hopkinsville, Kentucky on Friday, September 16th. The house was $3,750. The tickets were $5 a piece in those days. That meant there was about, 750 people there. 15, yeah, about. And then the next night I was in Corinth, Mississippi, and the house was $9,500, and I made $100. I made $70 on a $3,750 house, and I made $100 on a $9,500 house. And in Corinth, Mississippi, by the way, those $5 tickets in a $9,500 house means that they drew almost 2,000 people in Corinth, Mississippi, because it was the only time they ran it that year, and those people didn't get to leave and go to Memphis and see wrestling all the time. So a spot show drawing 1,000 people in a small town at a $5 average ticket happened everywhere in every territory in wrestling in those days. And that $5 ticket in today's money would be $16.65. Anyway, so you take a $5,000 spot show. You take off the 5% tax that either the athletic commission or the state would levy. Some places 6%, some place 8%, whatever. Let's say 5%, $250. Now you're left with $4,750. The sponsoring group gets 25% of the gate after taxes. So if your local high school football team said, I'm going to bring wrestling to the local high school, and we're going to use the money to buy new football uniforms, then the football team goes out and sells the tickets, and the coach puts up the posters, and they have the high school gym to hold the thing. And they also get the food and drink concessions, so they get the 2 liters and the hot dogs, and they do that whole thing. And they, on a $5,000 house, they're 25%, they'd get $1,187.50 after tax. So that after the taxes were taken out. So that means they got $1,200 plus their food and drink concessions to buy new football uniforms. So they're happy. You didn't pay any rent on a building. You didn't have any advertising costs whatsoever because the local group does it all. That's why you get a local group that knows what they're doing and they're motivated. You get a bunch of people. You got some that don't, you don't. So now you're down to $3,563. Well, you got to give the guy that hauled the ring $200 because your ring guy, whether it's Buddy Wayne or maybe he made his son Ken pull the truck or Eddie Marlin or whoever, they get $200 for the ring. Now you're down to $3,363. You probably spent close to $100 printing the posters and the flyers. And if it's a good house, then you probably got it in your contract that the sponsor has to pay for those. But if it's a bad house, then you say, fuck it, we'll pay for the posters and flyers, and it's like you're giving them something. Now you're down to $3,263. Now comes paying the talent, Brian. We remember that the formula for paying the wrestlers has been explained by a number of promoters, but was only ever really adhered to by Sam Muchnick and Paul Bosch, at least in the modern era.
That's right. They were known for being fair, in Sam Muchnick's case, down to the penny being fair. And of course, Jim Crockett on the stand explained how this all works, although he's lucky no one really cracked down on his answers there.
His figures didn't add up. That's reprinted in the Midnight Express book, too, his testimony of how they pay the boys. But anyway, in the 20s and 30s, Strangler Lewis, Joe Stecker, all those, that's why they the world title was the most valuable thing in sports, the World Wrestling Championship, because it could be controlled and maximized because it was a work, but that's why everybody was double crossing each other. And that's why the promoter always wanted to control the champion, because in those days, Strangler Lewis and Jim Londos, they might have got 60 or 70% of the gate themselves, and you pay everything else, and then maybe the promoter makes money, unless it's the promoter that the champion is hooked up with, and then everybody's sharing. So that's why there was such chaos in those days. But in the modern era, it's settled down to where, theoretically, if your house is $100,000, let's use a round number, then you are supposed to pay 33% to the talent, which would be $33,000. And of that $33,000, 2/3 of it is supposed to go to the main event. In other words, 2/3 of the third goes to the main event. That's why the NWA champion and his challenger in St. Louis made thousands of dollars, because that was the main event. That was the match that drew the money, sold the tickets, and everybody else on the card is taken care of in descending order. But as the modern territories fleshed out, you couldn't do that because every major territory ended up having more than one or two or three or even four really main event guys in it. When you had a deep territory like the Carolinas, or like Mid-South Wrestling, or like Vern always kept a small crew, but they were all names, or in the WWF. And remember, Ernie Ladd, Ivan Koloff, and Superstar Billy Graham went to Vince Sr. one time and said, even when one of us is in the main event and the other ones are in preliminaries, we're your trilogy of heels and we're all main event guys, and we demand to be paid the same no matter what position we're in on the card. And he went for it because they were right. But when you got multiple big stars in a territory, the pay discrepancy between that big main event payoff and everything else on the card was tightened up, which meant that nobody was making the $5,000 and $6,000. I don't say nobody. There were points where guys made that and more, but not with regularity, to the point where when Watts was drawing gates that were twice as much as St. Louis ever thought of, his single main event payoffs weren't as big because he was paying a deeper crew down the roster. But now we will go back to our $5,000 spot show. After we paid the expenses I just mentioned, we got $3,263 left over. Now, the third of the house going to the talent was supposed to be the third of the house after taxes, but not after the sponsors' money and not after the ring and etc. But you know those wrestling promoters. They know that a guy that's working in their territory, that's working the big towns, if it's the Memphis territory, they're in Memphis and Louisville that week. If it's Mid-South, they're in Oklahoma City and Tulsa and New Orleans. If it's Georgia, they're in the Omni as well as in fucking, Hushmas, Georgia. This is just a spot show. They make their money on the big towns. So if you say, hey, you live in Nashville, you're booked in Hohenwald, Tennessee, 90 miles each way or whatever on Thursday night, you're not expecting much, but it adds up over the course of the week. So if you've got 10 guys on the card, remember we talked about sometimes the spot shows would have 6 or 8 guys and they'd have 2 singles and then a main event tag match and a referee. But let's say you've got 10 guys and 1 referee on the spot show, and you're probably, if you're a territory of any size, running another show that same night somewhere else with the same size crew. If you've got 2 guys in your main event that you kind of want to take care of, that you're using on top in your territory, and you pay them $150, then that's the equivalent of $500 a piece today, because this is 1980, and they had a 3-hour drive to go to the spot show. If you've got 4 guys on the card, you then pay $100 to. That's the equivalent of $332 each today. And then you got 5 guys, your 2 opening matches and your referee, that you might pay $75 to, and that is generous. That's $250 a piece in today's money. and you've spent $1,075. Now, some of the territories, this would have been a little generous on payoffs for a $5,000 spot show. Other territories, it had been about right, and other territories may have been the other way, but it's within the range. As I mentioned, I was the lowest paid fucking guy in the Memphis territory. And on a $3,750 house, I got $70. So the idea that people are going to get $75 on a $5,000 house ain't unusual. And the same thing, I got $100 for that show in Corinth, Mississippi. Here's what I did in Corinth. I managed Dennis Condrey, who beat the Stray Cat, who was Ken Wayne. I managed Lucifer and the Prince of Darkness, who were Duke Myers and Frank Morrell the Angel, as they lost to Terry Taylor and Bobby Eaton. Me and Jimmy Hart lost to Coco Ware in a handicap match, and I got eliminated in a battle royal. But it was only 170 miles from Memphis. Or from Nashville, rather. But anyway, so you've got guys making the equivalent of between $500 and $250 in today's money to go to a spot show at a high school gym and fucking work 3 hours from your house. And that was every night that the big towns didn't run. So after you've paid the talent about $1,075, you've still got $2,188 left over. And you probably took in $400 or $500 at the merchandise table. Because the merchandise tables in those days used to run in Louisville, for example, average was about $800 for 3,000 people. But they were there every week. Most of those people came every week, so everything wasn't new for them. But one of these towns, everything, every picture, every program, every T-shirt, whatever they had, they'd never seen it before, and they weren't going to have an opportunity to get it again. So 50-cent programs, dollar pictures, you took in an extra $500 from 1,000 people easily. So that means you got right at about $2,700, $2,688 to be precise. And if that's just a spot show, you're not even taking TV money out, because if you're paying money to be on in Evansville, Indiana, you take that out of the Evansville house show. You don't take it out of the spot show. So that $2,688 goes back in cash to the office, whoever the office might be, because somebody has the final word, Brian, in every territory. Even if it's Eddie Marlin carrying it back to Jerry Jarrett, or it's Jack Curtis carrying it back to Bill Watts, or whoever's carrying it back to whatever promoter, fucking Coach John Heath carrying it back to Eddie Graham. Whoever the final authority is. Who would your guy be?
Hildebrand?
Actually, Sandy Scott.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
But whoever the final authority is determines where that money goes from there, because remember, this is all in cash. Nobody used credit cards at spot shows in those days. You walked up to the fucking window or table in front of the high school gym door and gave them $5, and they gave you a fucking roll ticket, right? That was it. And for the advance tickets that the sponsoring groups had sold, let's say you had advance tickets at Joe's Food Mart and Bill's Chicken Place and Ben's Laundromat. Somebody from the high school football team, one of the coaches, whoever, would go to all those places the morning of the show, and they'd get all the tickets, and they would get the cash for any of the tickets that had been sold. So when they got to the show and talked to the promotion representative that afternoon, when they opened the doors for the event, you would either have X number of tickets, X number of cash, whatever reconciled, right? But nobody was writing checks. Nobody's using credit cards. So the point is that $2,688 goes back to the office. Now, I'm not saying that anybody did this. I'm just saying it wouldn't have been hard to do, right? Let's say you take $688 of that cash that you've just been handed and put it into the FIA fund. The FIA fund stands for fuck 'em in the ass. That goes in the FIA fund, and $2,000 goes into the bank and on your company reports and et cetera, right? Would that be difficult to do?
What do you mean, would that be difficult to do?
Would it be difficult for somebody to do that if you had run a show in Hohenwald, Tennessee that generated $5,000 in cash, you'd given the high school football team $1,187, paid the commission tax, paid the ring guy, paid the talent, and with that leftover $2,688 that you've got in cash that nobody has any record of except you, it would not be difficult to deposit and report to the federal government less than that amount, would it?
I mean, not only would it not be difficult, this is just simply how it was done.
So, I'm just establishing it wouldn't be hard at all, and it's entirely reasonable when you're dealing with these amounts of money. So you figure that every promotion in the business ran at least 2 spot shows a week, many and most of them more, right? So let's say you just did that twice a week. You contributed $688 in cash to the FIA fund twice a week. That's $1,376 a week. If you do that 52 weeks a year because you run those spot shows week in and week out, month in and month out, year in and year out, 52 times a year of that is $71,552 in the FIA fund. And do you know what that equals in 2021? $238,196 that you could skim off spot shows in small towns and nobody would ever notice it was gone.
Hey, can I ask you a quick question? When you talked about Nick Goulas building his office with cash, how much was it?
Well, it was over $100,000, but I have testimony from 3 different people that said that in the last 2 years he was in business, when he had lost the biggest part of his territory and his towns that he was running at that point weren't doing the best they'd ever done, he still had nearly $200,000 in cash in his office safe. And that was in 1980. So the point is, $688 in cash off of a spot show in those days, going back to the office of a well-established promotion that had big towns running. And in the big towns, even then, a lot of it was cash, but the arenas would give you a settlement check. So you couldn't play ha-ha with the regular arenas like you could with the spot shows. But there were plenty of spot shows to go around. $688 twice a week equaled $71,000, which is the equivalent of almost $250,000 a year today in skim off of a spot show. And as I've just broken down, it was entirely doable. And I will also tell you this. I've mentioned Bogalusa, Louisiana, many times and popped the people who lived there. This was a fact. I was there. I have the documents. Bill Watts, Mid-South Wrestling, ran the high school football field in Bogalusa, Louisiana in 1984 and did a $34,000 house. 4,000 plus people. Wrestling had, if they'd ever been in Bogalusa, it hadn't been in years. They had a great sponsoring group. It was at the high school football field. It was a beautiful night. All cash. So, in 2021, $34,000 equals $89,764.58. Do you mean to tell me that today, right now, November 2nd, 2021, that you could run an event in Bogalusa, Louisiana, sell 4,000 tickets and generate $90,000 in cash, and it wouldn't get some attention today? And that same night that we were there doing that, there were at least 20 other major live pro wrestling events in the United States that night alone, and 150 of them that week. Hello, Newman. So,
how valuable is a local sponsor to a promoter, even if they were a big promoter like a Jim Crockett Jr.? When you had a local sponsor that you've been with for years, how valuable was that guy or that, whoever that may be?
Okay, there's 2 different kinds of sponsors. And this is something else people don't understand. a financial sponsor like Mattress Mac, Jim McInville,
Right.
Gallery Furniture in Houston, he paid an unknown amount. I'm not privy to that, but he paid Paul Bosch either per week or per month for banners in the arena, his banner on the interview set on the Channel 39 TV show, and commercials and interaction. And that was huge because Paul Bosch was already running a profitable wrestling promotion. What he did for Gallery Furniture or any of those other sponsors where you see the banners, you see commercials on the show, you see the guy being interviewed, none of that cost the promoter any money whatsoever. It's, as the old saying goes, you're selling them the sleeves off your vest. So Paul Bosch was already making money because he was running a profitable wrestling promotion. Anything that Gallery Furniture paid him to be on the television show, to have banners in the arena that he was already renting, to be on the TV show he was already producing and airing, was gravy, 100% profit. But the sponsors for spot shows, as I just talked about, like the high school football team or whatever, they were called sponsors in those towns because that was your in to get in that town. If you walked up, and I've found this out, of course, in modern wrestling, there's a lot of schools and armories and things that have been so burnt over the last 20 years by modern wrestling and deathmatch promotions and outlaw bullshit. You can't just walk up and say, hey, you've got a beautiful 2,500 seat high school gym there in Southern Indiana where basketball is king. And you know, these arenas are as nice as some fucking, New York buildings. You can't just go in there and say, I want to rent it and have a wrestling show. Well, we don't care. But if the local group that either the high school basketball team needs new uniforms, or the football team needs something, or the local fire department needs new equipment, or they're raising money for some local children's charity, they'll give them the fucking high school gym, and they will give them the use of the facilities because they're raising money for a local group or a local person. So you find a sponsor group like that and say, I'll give you 25% of the house after the commission tax, 5%, whatever. I'll give you 5% or 25% of the house, and you can have all the food and drink concessions. I get 75% plus the wrestling merchandise. I'll plug it on TV. I'll bring the card. I'll bring the ring, and we'll set it up and have it. You do the promotion, you do the publicity, get us in the local newspaper, get us on the local radio, get your kids on the football team out pushing these tickets door to door like Girl Scout cookies, and the building is being furnished to you by the high school because you're involved. That way, there's almost no upfront money by anybody, and you go on the fucking house. That was how spot shows were run in every territory for years and years and years. And that's also how, once you got your territory going and you had your weekly towns or your bi-weekly towns or your regular towns or whatever, if they were going and doing well and you had a full roster of talent that you could keep busy 6 and 7 nights a week, you could go into these towns and make that kind of money. You couldn't bring guys in from all over the country, fly them in, rent a building in this small town, sell tickets on your own and make any money. But under that arrangement, the guys already live in the area. They're working the territory. It's all, it's all on the come rather than renting a building or putting up big publicity, etc. And everybody made a fucking fortune. Wrestlers sometimes didn't make a fortune, but as I said, if you were a promoter figured into the office, or a top wrestling star that was figured into that territory, I'm sure in some cases, even though it didn't show it on paper, Dusty Rhodes in Florida, Lawler in Tennessee, the guys that are figured in, they probably made as much as most of the rest of the guys on the card to show up in some of those places, even if it didn't show it on paper. Lawler may have got $80 for Tupelo like everybody else, but then he also it came to him in the end somehow.
Does the promoter look for any opportunity they can to grab a piece of the concessions?
In those small towns, no, unless you're a fucking idiot. Don't fuck with it, because then, besides the fact that you're taking away some of the incentive that the local group has to sponsor the thing, then you've got to send somebody out there to oversee the fucking food concession sales. If you don't want a piece of a sponsor's food concessions, you either want to do it all yourself or leave it all to them, because then it's a mess. And then if you want a piece of their food and drink, they might want a piece of your t-shirts and programs. But I'm just telling you, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars were generated for wrestling promoters this way. And for the guys who say they were what is the minimum wage right now? Is it $7.25 an hour?
Well, I have to double check.
But we're close. Say it's 7 something, because they won't raise it. I think it's $7.25. I was
$7.25, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I was the lowest paid guy in the Memphis territory in 1983. There was nobody that was on the card that was making any at one point at one point when Dundee was booking, I was doing halfway decent. But the last half of 1983, there was nobody on the card making less money than me. And I was averaging $300 a week. And that was 40 years ago.
How much was the photo guy making who took your place?
Well, he didn't make as much as I did at it, because he didn't hustle it, he didn't work it, and business was starting to head downhill. And he didn't have as many magazine connections. And like I said, he wasn't me. But I was making more doing the pictures than I was when but the point is, $300 a week was the lowest paid spot on the roster for a guy in the Tennessee territory that was, except if you were, as I said, figured in Lawler, ownership, Dundee, major guy, had a deal like Austin Idol, Jimmy Valiant, whatever. If you're just a regular guy, it was one of the lower paying territories. And that is the same thing as somebody who works minimum wage right now, 40 years later, would make to work 40 hours a week. So the wrestlers got somewhat, their impressions got skewed. Yes, you still struggled at $300 a week, because you were doing 6 fucking towns all over the goddamn area, every week, and paying for your gas and paying for a hotel one night a week, and etc. But still, on my birthday, like I said, September 17th, 1983, I'm in Corinth, Mississippi. I got paid $100. That's the equivalent of $275 today. And I was a rookie in a brand new business that I was in. So I wasn't complaining. It worked out in the end. But anyway, as you can see, again, these are facts and figures. And for people who think that wrestling was just a penny ante, low budget thing, it wasn't, especially if you owned the fucking territory, especially if you were the promoter, the boss, or the booker, which is why I always aspired to those things. But the wrestling business itself was generating an incredible amount of money off ticket sales and the numbers of people coming to the matches all over the country. And that's why I said, they better be glad. Every company, every single wrestling promotion in the country today better be glad that they're not subsisting on selling tickets. They're getting paid to do TV shows, whether people are interested in them or not. Which is kind of, let me just say this, which is kind of like when WCW put out those contracts and people started making the same money, whether they gave a shit or not, performed or not, did what they were told or not, or goddamn drew or not. There's no incentive. Go ahead.
As far as booking, how hard is that? Because I would think it's a lot easier, not that it's easy to book, but if you were a good booker, it's a lot easier to book a week-to-week territory, or even something where you go every 2 weeks, as opposed to something where, in a lot of cases, the gates don't matter, the houses don't matter, it's all about delivering the television rating.
Yeah, and also it was easier to book week to week because you had a clear roadmap of you're going to be in that town every week or every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever. And you can time your TVs accordingly to shoot an angle and then remind people of it and then heat it up the week before the house show, et cetera, et cetera. But you also had a steady stream of income. That's why it took territory so long to go out of business when they ended up doing that at one point or another, because there was such a steady stream of income that you could get ahead of your skis, but you could stay there for a while before it got to nut cutting time.
Hey, let me ask you another question. Other than Salvador Luderoth and, Vince McMahon technically in Cape Cod, a few other examples, how come more wrestlers didn't look into buying buildings? I'm not saying you could own every building in a territory, but specific buildings where you know that even if you're not running a wrestling show, you can get other things in there all the time.
Well, it's been done on a small time basis. I mean, you could say that actually the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles was kind of one of those deals because the Eatons had an exclusive lease on it. And that's why they made a fortune for so long. And I've told a story about, there was a guy named Ernie Couch in Manchester, Kentucky. And when the Poffos were running ICW, he would go to the matches around in Combs or Hazard or where all those Eastern Kentucky towns. He'd come to Manchester. Well, there's no building. We don't have a place to have the matches. So he put up one of those pole barns in his backyard that seated like 400 people or whatever. They advertised it as, come to ICW Wrestling in Manchester at Ernie Couch's place. And then later on, he got pinball machines and a couple of fucking video games, and they made it Ernie Couch's Entertainment Center.
Sounds like a fun guy.
Yeah, and honestly, Danny Davis, Ohio Valley Wrestling, the Davis Arena, that was the idea there. And even though we didn't own the actual building, we had a long-term lease on it. And honestly, there was a plan at one point I don't even think I've said this before. I don't even know if the OVW guys knew about this, but there was a plan at one point that Danny was talking to a guy that owned a lot of real estate in town and had a piece of real estate when wrestling was still somewhat hot and interesting in the early 2000s, that he was thinking about building an arena a small arena, because there in Louisville, there's no small arenas anymore. The Louisville Gardens, 6,500 seats, but that's closed. There's a cattle barn called Broadbent Arena out at the fairgrounds. It's bigger than that, but it smells like cow shit all the time, and it's very old. And all the new arenas are just so much bigger. There was thought of, what about a 2,000-seat arena in Louisville that we could have concerts? It could be customized for concerts, maybe MMA, pro wrestling on a regular basis. That's when we had a Wix Pizza sponsorship, a Wix Pizza location next to it or in the lobby. That's something that, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to get off the ground before, I got sideways with the WWF and quit giving a shit, and then wrestling cooled off, and that would have been the main revenue driver. But I think it'd be a good idea for somebody that could get the location and the promise from other people in the community of other events, whether it be concerts or fights of some other genre or whatever, and keep people in a building. Something like that would in a lot of major markets would flourish. But you can't find promoters that also know how to run buildings, and you can't find people that know how to run buildings that also know how to promote wrestling.
Well, one good thing is that if any of these promoters from carrying all this money got a bad back, or perhaps their feet hurt, what I've just recently learned is there is a wonderful source to heal all their pains.
You say just recently because we haven't even had a chance to try this stuff out. It's so new. But, folks, we have gotten a package in the mail. Brian and I both did last night, and we're recording early today. So we are anxiously awaiting the opportunity to pop these boxes open and play with our new toys. But a new sponsor of the program, and somebody you're going to be hearing a lot about, and you're going to love them, the folks at Home Medics. Because Brian and I both got two of their fine products, as I said just this past evening, a back massaging cushion and a power foot massager. And I don't know where Homedics has been all my life, because holy shit, we've just been talking about our rotten backs, and much less when I was at the Comic Cons and the Fan Fest, C2E2, whatever the case may be, standing up at a booth all day on my feet. This would have been perfect. This foot massager, you plug it in, you stick your feet in there, it goes crazy. I mean, I can't wait to see whether it's got the optional toe sucking feature, but nevertheless,
it does not.
It does not. Well, shucks. Well, if you've got a significant other that has a toe sucking feature, you may maybe fill that in.
What?
However, the back massage cushion, it's a back massager, and whether you're lying down or sitting up, whether whatever your comfort level is, it massages, it has vibration, loosens the muscles in your legs and back and everything, so they can cover you up here from head to toe, the folks at Homedics. And by the way, that's Homedics, even though it's spelled Homedics. When I first heard Homedics, I thought, these are doctors for prostitutes or people of ill moral repute?
No. I was thinking, who did Ken Ramey manage during the pandemic? The Homedics.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Jim Starr and Billy Garrett would be upset at you for that.
But I'm impressed that you know the names.
Thank you very much. But anyway, as I said, Brian and I have talked about our bad backs. Remember, I've been over to stick a flag in the yard back in August, and I couldn't hardly walk for 2 weeks. I've sprung my sciatic nerve or whatever. If I'd only had this then, that's where have you been all my life, Homedics? And as a matter of fact, they're going to have a special offer now that they're sponsors. If you go to homedics.com, that's HOMEDICS, homedics.com/JCE, use the promo code JCE, you're going to get a free portable phone sanitizer when you buy $100 or more in massage products. And that's a $60 value. Here's the problem, Brian. Is that a sanitizer that sanitizes your portable phones, or is it a phone sanitizer that is portable? It says free portable phone sanitizer. Which part's portable? See, these are the questions we keep asking.
Why don't they call it a phonetizer?
I have no idea. But folks, Homedics is not some fly-by-night operation. They were founded in 1987 by a Detroit family who founded Homedics. It was the Ho family. Beulah and Frank Ho. They founded Homedics to make people's lives better, and today they're the established leader in wellness and home health innovations. They're backed by traditional wisdom that comes from Beulah Ho and modern technology. That's where Frank comes in. They've got an A+ rating at the Better Business Bureau, which means you better do business with them, or somebody will come knocking on your door and potentially steal your pets. Join the millions of customers who trust the Homedics family to take care of their family as well as returning their pets. But anyway, again, go to homedics.com/JCE. Use the promo code JCE. You're going to get a free portable phone sanitizer with $100 or more in massage products, which is a $60 value. And boy, howdy, I can't wait when we finish this show, I get to go lay down on this thing and stick my feet in it. And I'll be a pleasant kind of vibrating, not the rotten kind when I get mad and I vibrate, a pleasant kind of vibrating.
That's right. Positive vibes. And I'm excited, like you said, the one thing for your back, you could lay down, you could sit up. So I like being able to have options.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I hate going to chiropractors because oftentimes they rub me the wrong way. But in this case, with the folks at Homedics, now we can do all this at home. The feet, the back, the legs. I wonder what happens if you lay on this back massager face down.
Let's not find out. Homedics.com. Well, Jim, we promised questions, and indeed, we do have some listener questions here at the very end of the show, but we're going to try to get some really good questions here.
I'll try to give you some really good answers.
There is one topic, one question that has been sent in more than anything else in the past several days. I'll read one question here for everyone.
Okay.
This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from James in Edmonton. Jon Moxley recently released a new book, and there have been some quotes from the book doing the rounds on social media. One in particular is what he had to say about Kevin Dunn.
I must say, people have tweeted this to me, just a picture of one of the pages, so I haven't read the whole book or even the entire chapter, whatever, but there's some interesting comments about Kevin. Go ahead.
And James gives us some context here. The content for the excerpt below is the following. When Moxley won his first WWE title, which was the U.S. title in 2013, he mouthed off the phrase, "Give me my fucking belt." The camera feed picked up him mouthing it, although the mics did not. Either way, when Moxley went to the back, Kevin Dunn told him what happened, and at the time, Moxley didn't realize he said that, so he apologized and said it wouldn't happen again, and Kevin Dunn told him it was all good. Then 2 days later, he calls him into a production truck and forces him to apologize to all the cameramen and everyone involved in production for saying that.
What?
Saying that Moxley's initial apology wasn't sincere enough. So that's where we get Moxley's take. So let me stop right there because I didn't even know the context for this until this. What do you think of that?
Well, I didn't know the context either as far as I saw the page about the apology, or about the aftermath of the apology. I didn't get the part about it being his U.S. title win and he had said fuck on. I understand going to the guys that don't mouth fuck on television because you couldn't do that then. They're all a bunch of potty mouths now. But it sounds like the little fucking ferret himself that is Kevin Dunn, that he would apologize to the cameramen because you said fuck and they caught it on camera. Fuck you. How about that?
That's just a power
It's
trip.
ridiculous. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well, it's like when I had to apologize to Kevin Dunn for calling him Bucky Beaver and telling him he ought to get his teeth fixed. Several days later, we got back from Canada. Vince said, "You need to apologize to Kevin." I said, "He started it." "Well, but he's very important around here. You really need to apologize to." So one of the, I think, 2 or possibly 3 times in my life that I apologized to anybody and didn't mean it. I apologize. I've told the story. Vince had Kevin come over to his house, and we sat at Vince's dining room table, and Vince and Bruce fucked off somewhere to leave us alone so that I could apologize to Kevin. "I'm sorry." And that's when he started crying and snurfling and talking about how all the kids had always made fun of his teeth when he was little. And he thought the best way to combat that was by being a dickhead to everyone he met for the rest of his life. My mental thought was, get your fucking teeth fixed. You're making a fucking $1 million a year. But so he's basically a little scrawny, runty, rat-faced, fucking miserable prick that has gotten power there and does everything he can to keep sucking up to Vince and keep doing the Renfield thing and laughing at all of Vince's stuff. And he likes to lord over the boys and the talent because he can do those things. And there was one time at TNA in Orlando, one of the tapings. I'm trying to think who all was. Terry Taylor was in the room. I was in the room. A couple of different WWF alumni of some description were in the room and talking about Kevin Dunn. And right as somebody said, "What a miserable, unhappy motherfucker," another one of the WWF alumni walked into the room and said, "Who are you talking about, Kevin Dunn?" It was that well known. Just a miserable, unhappy little hatchet-headed fuck. So maybe Moxley and I do have something to bond over.
Well, again, here is a quote from Moxley's new book, which I must admit I may want to read because it looks like it'll be entertaining. But on that previous story, Moxley, from his book, "It was all good. If I had gone in there and been an asshole, why didn't he just say, 'Fuck you, you're being an asshole'? No, he let me go through the whole song and dance while being completely phony. pretending to accept my apology, pretending it was all good and we were friends. Then 5 minutes later, this little, I'll do this for YouTube, this little C-word rat goes right to the rest of the office and says, I don't give a sufficient apology, and whatever other bullshit he probably said about me, behind my back no less. This dickless motherfucker, and it was 48 hours later. Why didn't you just call me on the phone when it happened and say, fuck you, we're all mad at you, and if you do it again, you're fired? That would have been easy to understand. Instead, I got summoned to the secret castle to meet the magical king wizard who lives in the truck and controls the universe to beg for forgiveness. What are these stupid little games? The reality in a place like WWE is that one comment, one little seed planted by a guy in Kevin Dunn's position, can be extremely detrimental to someone's future there. That's a lot of power, and that power breeds ego. Connecticut, old rich boys club ego. I've heard all kinds of stories about the guy messing with people's careers, but this isn't that kind of book. Suffice to say, that dude is a fuckbag. Maybe this is that kind of book. No, but for real, don't even get me started on, no, this is not that kind of book. Fuck Kevin Dunn. And there's the Kevin Dunn chapter or section of the book.
And he's right. And, again, I can testify from personal experience that as soon as I apologized to Kevin Dunn, okay, we shook hands and he left, and he never said another good thing that I was about me ever when I wasn't in the room. Every once in a while, he'd throw me a bone verbally when I was in the room, but I'm sure he would take that back as soon as I left. And I knew, and I enjoyed announcing, but I didn't do as much of it as I would have because of Kevin Dunn, because he was always trying to find a way to either split me and JR up because we were too Southern, or he just didn't want me on the shows because I told him that he looked like a fucking beaver and he knew I fucking hated his guts. I wasn't going to, go over to the studio and hang around and fetch his coffee to get him to change his mind about me because I didn't like him. And while I liked doing the announcing, I knew that I would have been doing more of it if it had not been for him, and I didn't give a shit. I wasn't going to be nice to him regardless. I was going to tolerate him as best I could, because every time I tried to go out of my way to do something that could be considered professional or even halfway polite to him, I just got the same, nah. So fuck you. But that's what it was. He did that. That's why Kevin Kelly, because Kevin Kelly wasn't going to sit there and blow him all the time. And Kevin didn't have a nice hairdo and professional news experience. He just knew wrestling. If Kevin Dunn liked you, then you would get and he loves Lawler because the King's Teflon and he loves the sense of humor, and Vince likes Lawler. So that means that he has to. But if he didn't like you, he was going to do everything he could to not have to deal with you.
It's really fucked up to do this to a young wrestler, to bring them in right when they have this moment and just try to beat them down for no reason. Bringing them into the truck to apologize to all the cameramen, that's all about you.
I've never heard of that before, though, ever. Okay, that's apologize to the crew. What? Unless I fell on one of them and broke their leg, I don't think they're offended at me, and I'm probably not going to apologize to them. There was no apology to the crew. If you had flattened the tire on the crew's bus, apologize to the crew. Again, that's kind of bullshit that they do up there. And again, it's because their priorities are so skewed in the WWF since way before I showed up there in the early 90s. The TV was more important than the wrestling. Instead of shooting the TV around the wrestling, they shot the wrestling around the TV. And I told Vince when he asked me to apologize to Kevin Dunn, I said, I'm sorry to you that I was not aware, because I've never been in a single promotion anywhere where the TV guys told the wrestlers what to do instead of the other way around. So I apologize for not being aware that this was an anomaly.
All right. Well, on this topic, real quick, someone just sent me another recent WWE format from a TV taping. because these things always seem to get out. This is from the season premiere of Raw, October 25th.
Are they still not writing everybody's name on the top of the format so you can know who to fucking find and kick out in the fucking parking lot when their format is found?
No, at the top of the format, the only thing it says is you're watching the longest running weekly episodic television show in history.
It should say you are leaving paperwork on the longest running blah, blah, blah to be found by people and put on the internet, you fucking idiot.
I'm trying to see if there's anything really interesting in here. I mean, it has obviously some of the promos, but maybe the most interesting thing is the list of talent. They have two lists, talents not working a match and talents not represented on Raw, number 1483. And then there's also a separate list of all the available talent on the roster, which is broken down by the champions and then male baby faces, male heels, babyface tag teams, heel tag teams, female baby faces, female heels. What
so I'm just so the whole talent roster is listed on the format for the show?
According to this is Raw TV talent available in Houston, Texas, October 25th, 2021.
But is that the actual format, or is that just a talent roster? You're looking at something I'm not looking at.
Well, no, because you know what? He sent me page 1 and page 16, so he sent me the middle of the format isn't here. I can get that.
Well, so the meat of the matter has been left out, but that's not unusual. The way the talent rosters were done when I was there, and I assume long before that, and probably still to this day, is you list your... Back then, there was no women's list because there was no separate women's division. But you have your... Let's see if I can remember. Baby faces on the left, heels on the right, managers and referees down at the bottom, and announcers in the middle.
It's all that at the top, and at the very bottom, you have commentators / ring announcers and interviewers. I don't see managers listed anywhere. Well, obviously,
there aren't any.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if MVP is listed anywhere on here, but he's out right now, I guess, too. So he's not even on here.
That would be an overall talent roster, not just for one particular show, but that's the roster that we worked off of to book everything. You had a list of all of the talent that you were using. Everybody was on contract, everybody that had an individual per night deal, whatever the case. Baby faces on the left, heels on the right, and also separate for announcers, managers, referees.
All right, well, let's get our next question here, Jim. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jeff in Massachusetts. When you talk about the Von Erichs, you and Brian never mention Mike Von Erich. Why do you and Brian not mention him when you talk about the other Von Erichs?
That's the question?
That is indeed the question.
We don't talk about Chris a lot either. We don't talk about Doris a lot. It's not that they were horrible people. They just didn't make a lot of mark in wrestling. And, you know, I was there when Mike was still wrestling. And before he had I was there. I think he had the shoulder injury while I was there. And then...
In Israel, I think.
Well, then we had just left because we left before it. One of the reasons we left was Israel. We got that Texas Stadium payoff for the $250,000 house in May when we were in the tag team title match. I think it was like $1,100, and immediately started looking up Jim Crockett's phone number that Ric Flair had given us. And then we heard they were going to Israel, and we said, okay, this is the perfect time to get the fuck out of here. Because when they went to Israel, we talked to some of the guys that went, they flew them over there. They met them at the airport with I guess they don't have National Guard over there, but whoever the military was, and they escorted them everywhere. And outside their hotel rooms, they each had a service member of whatever the service was with a machine gun stationed outside their hotel room doors. Not a place I would ever want to fucking go. But anyway, so the point is Mike was there and he was still wrestling, and it was painful because you could tell that the people loved the Von Erichs, but they still could see through Mike, and they didn't want to boo him, and they kind of wanted to cheer for him. it was almost like watching, if you go to your kid's softball game and they're not doing too well on the field, you're really wanting to pull for them, but you can't not see it, right? And that was because he was skinny and he didn't have a fireball personality. He wasn't an athlete like Kevin and Kerry and David. He was a real quiet kid, but he also, he was doing some of the same things the other Von Erichs were doing. And so mentally, he was not that swift on the uptake most of the time before his surgery, toxic shock, high fever, and brain damage. And so then when they tried to put him back in the ring after all that, it was so sad that, everybody just knew this is not going to work. And then what happened. So he just wasn't, he was like Chris Chris was not the tall, skinny one. Chris was the short, dumpy one.
Were you around Chris at all? I mean, after you were there in World Class, I mean, years later when he actually tried to break into the business.
No, the only time I was ever around Chris, I was around Chris when I was there. One time he was flying somewhere. Southwest Airlines was $30. You could go anywhere in the state of Texas then. So a lot of times the guys flew to West Texas or sometimes South Texas or whatever. And I remember him getting on the planes with some of the boys sometimes, just to go hang out with them at the show. He was probably mid-teens at that point. And
yeah.
I mean, one of the planes that we were on, I will just say that one of the boys, I'm thinking it was Dennis, might have seen him getting on Chris and just said, that boy doesn't know whether he's on an airplane or the space shuttle. Because he was off in another world.
Nowadays, wrestling fans obviously don't think too highly of Mike Von Erich's work. It's a very sad story. A lot of people say that Mike never wanted to do it. A lot of other people say Mike did want to do it, and the problem was he wasn't good enough. So you hear conflicting things.
I think that's the one. If he was going to do it, he felt an obligation because he was a Von Erich, and so he didn't want to. He knew that he couldn't, but he didn't want to embarrass the family or anybody, and that's where it led to the mental conflicts, I think.
But in 85, I mean, we all say this now, and it was said, later on in the 80s, were these things, I mean, you couldn't say too much openly in the locker room, but were these things being said about Mike then in the moment by people outside of the Midnight Express?
By the boys in the locker room?
Yeah.
Yes. Everybody knew when remember, Rip Oliver came in from Portland with Billy Jack.
Yeah.
And I managed Rip Oliver for the time he was there, and they put him in a program with Mike. And I think, actually, as I recall, the angle that when Kerry didn't get the movie role and came back, and that meant Billy Jack was there, and he was a spare babyface, and he was going back to Portland, the only reason Rip Oliver came to Dallas was to come with Billy Jack. And since he saw it wasn't working out, he was going to go back to Portland. So they did a deal where Rip slammed the door in the Will Rogers Coliseum in Fort Worth, one of the doors on Mike's hand, either broke the hand, broke the wrist or whatever, and he was suspended for doing that. And that's how he left the territory, as I recall. I mean, he had some matches with him, and Bobby and Dennis worked with Mike and Brian Adidas a few times. And he was a nice kid, and you tried to help him, and everybody, the veterans, tried to work with him, and Flair even had a match with him once. I think a TV match, they did some kind of angle for something. He went 10 minutes with Mike, and everybody tried.
Yeah.
But he wasn't real good or believable. And also there was an element of him just being just he didn't have an over-the-top personality. He wasn't the center of attention. He wasn't like Kerry, the fucking gorgeous Greek god jock that could just walk into a room and start laughing and everybody would fucking look at him. He was a quiet kid, nice kid, and you didn't have but I swear, one time Bobby and Dennis at a spot show, I remember it was a South Texas spot show. It may have been an afternoon before a San Antonio show, where Mike Von Erich and Brian Adias. And Brian Adias was a pretty good worker. But Mike is in there, and Bobby starts doing the stuff that Tojo Yamamoto taught him, where he would crouch down and try to sneak up on the babyface while the babyface was talking to the referee. And the people would say, oh, watch out. And then the babyface turn around and catch him, right? Well, Bobby's crouching and creeping, and Mike turns around and sees him, and Mike sees Bobby crouch down, and Mike turns around and crouches down. Well, then Bobby crouches down a little lower. Well, then Mike crouches. Now they're both doing a full squat in the middle of the ring. And then because Rick Hazard was the referee, and he used to ride with us sometime, and hey, referee, he's crouching. That's not legal. And I swear to God, Mike stood bolt straight upright as soon as I said that. Oh, shit. Like he was going to get disqualified. And it just, like I said, he was a nice kid. And I don't mean to say anything bad about him. And it's terrible the way it turned out. But he wasn't a good wrestler, unfortunately. And it was doomed.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Andy in Liverpool, England. Jim, did you see Paul Heyman tagging into a dark match with the Usos before tripping over the bottom rope and taking a few hits to the back before exiting the ring? What do you make of it, and have you done something similar in your time as a heel manager?
Oh, God, yes, a million times, but mine all looked better. No, I saw that somebody tweeted the footage. It's a dark match at a show somewhere, and it's not for TV, and Paul's there at ringside, and he gets mad at the baby faces, and it was such a high-up shot, and I'm looking at the Twitter screen. I don't even know who was in the match besides Paul, but he takes his jacket off, he whips the jacket off and everything, and he gets up on the apron, and he's going to come in and fight the baby face, and as he steps over the second rope and comes in, he, of course, trips and falls on his face, and they get on him, and boom, 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 and he rolls out, and he's having a heart attack. That was good. I always like to do it a different way because I would get mad. I'd take my fucking jacket off, right? And I'd throw it down and I'd cut the tantrum and I'd jump up on the apron of the ring and I'd be cussing and screaming at the baby face. And Ricky Morton would do it, or Bobby Fulton would do it, or whoever the main baby face would do it. They'd go, come on. And I go, I oughta, come on. And I oughta. And they would lay down in the middle of the ring and like cross their heart, like to hope to die. I'm not going to do anything. I'm laying here. Take your best shot. And I'd creep into the ring. And I said, are you going to stay there? I'll stay right here. You promise? Cross your heart? Yep. And I would say, okay. And then I'd run and try to drop the big elbow. And of course, they'd move out of the way and I would land. And oh my God. And they'd fucking chase me, but I would crawl out and roll out on the floor and sell that. And oh my God. And then I'd grab my jacket and I'd be yelling at the referee and I'd be yelling at the baby faces and I'd be telling Bobby and Stan what horrible shit that was. And as I was doing that, I'd be up on the apron of the ring and I would put my jacket on inside out, but not see it. So now everybody in the place is laughing at me because I got my jacket on inside out and they can see the liner, but I'm still yelling at people and I don't know this until Stan comes over and says, Jim, I'm what? Leave me alone. Jim, what? And he whispers to me. And then I look down and see the jacket. Oh, goddamn. And I whip the jacket off and ball it up and throw it down again. And now we've just killed 5 minutes and everybody's happy and nobody's taking any bumps except me. And then I get out and then they have the rest of their match. It's a manager spot. I love seeing Paul get active. I wish the trip had looked a little better because it was kind of obvious. He just kind of leaned in and face planted without hurting himself. But yes, and the old jump over the top rope and hang your fucking toe and fall in, all the shit I stole from Bobby Heenan. Yeah, I never could jump over the top rope for real, but I could fuck it up real easy. And it's just to keep the people fucking going while the guys are taking a breath and nobody notices.
I was surprised to see it. It was nice to see because it looks like Heyman was having fun, but also you never see him do anything physical really. But when I think of the trip spot, the best to me is the Lawler Funk match when Terry Funk goes to the floor and he gets himself caught up in the rope, that's the barricade. Yes. And you just stop noticing it. But by the time he gets in the ring, it's still wrapped around his foot and he just takes the perfect fall and he gets a big pop.
I stole that at a spot show match in Morristown, Tennessee, when it was, I can't remember. It may have been Bullet Bob and me and Killer Kyle in a handicap match or whatever. But
I think I was there.
You may have been there. It may have been one of the fan weeks. I got my leg caught around the rope, and I got in the ring, and it was caught around me. So trying to get that off, I got it around my arm, and when I fucking fell down, it was around my neck, and ended up I'm fucking hanging from the ropes by the fucking rope that's the security rope, and Bob's pulling on the other end of it. But you have to make it look like you didn't mean to do it. That's the whole point. Nobody likes it if they think you're just yanking their chain on purpose.
Well, our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Tim Hayes in Bristol, Virginia. What did Jim think of Curtis Thompson as a worker, and any memories of the man also known as Firebreaker Chip that he can share?
Oh, I didn't think much of Firebreaker Chip as a gimmick, but no, Curtis Thompson was another guy that was a heck of a guy. And if the territories had lasted past 88 or 89, he would have been established better in the business and probably would have had a decent career. By the time, they took him and made him Firebreaker Chip in WCW, I think that was still under Hurd. If it wasn't Hurd, it was Kip Fry.
I think it was Hurd. It was him and Todd Champion. Him and Todd Champion were a tag team.
Yes, because everybody had to have a fucking gimmick that some 6-year-old kid in Hurd's mind wanted to grow up and be like. I don't know why they didn't have a double knot spy on the roster as well. But as Curtis Thompson, as one of the U.S. males, he did fairly well. I think that was him and Bagwell, wasn't it?
No, that's Scotty Riggs.
Scotty Riggs, that's right. But anyway, Curtis, he had a great body, was a bodybuilder, was one of the guys that I believe was trained by Nelson Royal during that late 80s period of time there in the Carolinas, and worked South Atlantic, worked a lot of the independents after Crockett went out of business in that area, and worked a couple of Smoky Mountain shows for me. But I haven't heard or seen of him in years. Don't know what business he ended up getting into, but he was, like I said, he would have been a long-running talent in the wrestling business if the territories had not fallen by the wayside and he had no place to go like a lot of people did. We lost a ton of talent in the late 80s, early 90s.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Harry in Liverpool, England. Oh, everyone's in England today.
At least they're not in Starkville, Mississippi.
Why did Jim Crockett Promotions use the UIC Pavilion in Chicago instead of the Rosemont Horizon like the WWF and AWA? From what I can gather from research, Jim Crockett Promotions only used the Rosemont Horizon twice, and on their second show drew 12,500 people, which would have been more than any show in the UIC Pavilion could have drawn, as the UIC was a smaller building.
As I remember it, Crockett only ran the Rosemont Horizon once by himself. One of the shows was one of the Pro Wrestling USA shows in conjunction with Vernon, etc. Am I remembering that right, or do you know it all?
I don't know off the top of my head. Obviously, he was working with Vernon in 85 with Pro Wrestling USA.
Right, and the point is, Vern had a long-running relationship with the people at the Rosemont Horizon, because after the International Amphitheater, that had been the location for wrestling in Chicago, and the AWA had run there many times, right? But when Vince started expanding, he always wanted to go to the major building in any market. And by the time that this questioner is referencing the show that drew 12,000 people, that was December of 1986. Vince had already expanded into Chicago a few years earlier. He'd done WrestleMania 2 there earlier that year.
That was 86. That was April 86.
86, yeah. Vern Gagne, the AWA was doing poor business.
And let me just point out an important note. I don't think Vince did that well in the Rosemont Horizon for WrestleMania 2, even with the Chicago Bears. I don't think they sold it out.
No, they didn't sell out. But the thing is that Vince was giving he was tying up all these buildings. He was giving them dates, and he was requesting non-compete windows of as much as he could get on either side. So the way that it used to be done is you couldn't if Vince McMahon was running the Rosemont Horizon, he could tell the Rosemont Horizon, I don't want any other wrestling here than me, but that necessarily wouldn't mean anything on its own. And you couldn't legally, the Rosemont Horizon couldn't then turn around and tell other promotions, well, you can't come in because we've got Vince. Some places in history that's been done and they got away with it. But in this period, they couldn't. But if you said, I'm going to run the Rosemont Horizon, I'm going to contract with you to run your building 8 times a year, right? Which is basically an average of every 6 weeks, right? 6, 7 weeks. But I want a 3-week non-compete clause that a similar event can't be in your building 3 weeks before or 3 weeks afterwards. You can rent to whoever you want to, but not 3 weeks in front of or 3 weeks after me, because that's stepping on my business. And that's how he kept other people out. So Gary Juster's the one that got that date in December of 86. Gary at the time had been he started in the wrestling business working for Vern, and he knew a lot of people in the Midwest. He's from Minnesota. They were able to get in there, and possibly, I wasn't in the negotiations, but it may have been, they checked the Rosemont Horizon, called Vince McMahon, and Vince said, all right, well, let them in. Let's see what they do. And then they saw what they did, and they didn't want them in anymore. Or maybe it was like the Rosemont Horizon said, we've got to rent to these people because they're beating our door down and we don't want a fucking legal challenge or whatever. But they got that one event and did 12,000 people and almost $150,000. Midnight Road Warriors, Flair and Dusty, the whole card. And then we never went back to the Rosemont Horizon. And suddenly Vince was there a lot more than he had been. And the only place that Crockett could get to run Chicago once a month was the UIC Pavilion, which was a smaller building that only seated like just under 10,000 and was in a worse part of town and, wasn't the big shiny spot at the time. And that's the way it happened until, gosh, I guess it was the mid-90s that finally Vince bailed on the Rosemont Horizon and went to the United Center.
Yeah.
But that's how that happened in those days. In that you couldn't, in some cases, completely legally shut somebody out of a building entirely, but you could give them enough dates and get a non-compete window on either side that you effectively legally shut them out of the dates, unless they wanted to run the one Thursday that would be in the 5-day period in between your non-compete window.
So when people say Vince tried to put the territories out of business, specifically, he went after everyone's building and he went after everyone's TV. You don't even have to talk about talent. Those were the two moves he made.
Oh, I was going to bring up the talent. But yeah, he went after the TVs first, and then he's tied up the buildings. That's why Terry Funk had that idea and called Jerry Jarrett, because he thought that Jerry Jarrett would be the only one crazy enough to do it. You remember that, don't you?
I'm not sure.
During the days of the territories, what was the biggest night of the year for professional wrestling?
Either Thanksgiving or Christmas. Thanksgiving
night.
Yeah.
So Terry Funk told Jerry Jarrett sometime back in the 80s, what we ought to do is we ought to go and a year in advance book every major building in the seat of everybody's territory on Thanksgiving night, and then make them come to us to rent the buildings. And Jerry said, but Terry, what happens if they just say fuck it and don't want the buildings at all, and we've got to pay all those rents?
And that's when Terry found out his horse was sick, and he
then
left.
Terry said, well, Jerry, my horse is sick. But yeah, that was the rib. But that's the thing, is Vince wanted the number one building because that gave him the perception in the people's minds of being the most major league, and especially, the companies that wanted to run the big markets more regularly had to go to the secondary building.
Well, Jim, perhaps some of those promoters should have gotten together and instead of running a failed attempt to stop the WWE, gotten a good attorney and tried to put Vince out of business in the courtroom.
You know what? If they had just called, if Stephen P. knew had been out of law school, if Stephen P. New had even been out of Pampers at that time, because, my God, I think he was probably still pissing the bed back in those days. Of course, Stephen only quit pissing the bed 3 months ago, but nevertheless.
Oh, will you stop it?
I know the man they could have called to got all that tortuous interference tortured.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, well, whether you like tortuous interference or even tortured syntax, the one thing that you won't be tortured by is doubt or any type of sorriness or any type of regret when you retain the services of the inimitable Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. You will never regret the money that he will bestow upon you. You will never be sorry for the justice that he will bring to you. You will never have to apologize for the happy life that you will live after you get even with the no good, sorry, gum bumping sack of snake feces that has put you in whatever position that you need to go to court over. Because Stephen P. New is a man of the people, the leader, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette, and the man that can bring you deliverance in your trials and tribulations in the legal and jurisprudence system. Have we mentioned also he is the co-host of the House of Kayfabe podcast at houseofkayfabe.com that will have me as a special guest this coming Monday, November 8th, and days thereafter. It'll stay up forever. Like fungus on a shower curtain, it'll be with you until the end of time. Folks, Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. No matter what type of injury, whether it's the defective earplugs or the cancer-causing agents in household products or the contaminants left in groundwater or just plain no good activity where people are just trying to jack you around and they think they can get away with it, Stephen P. New will show them the error of their ways. He can show you an error in any era.
That's catchy. We'll see if he uses that on his next billboard. But Jim, let's get a few more questions before we wrap things up. A news story just breaking as we're recording.
Uh-oh, well, we'll fix it.
And I'll ask you a question about this in a moment. The Wrestling Observer is reporting that WWE's AJ Styles is dealing with a non-injury medical issue. According to this article by Josh Nason, AJ Styles has been off WWE Raw recently due to a non-injury medical issue, according to Dave Meltzer. Styles and Omos, is it Omos or?
He's almost ready to be a wrestler. I don't know if it's...
Styles and Omos were set to face the tag team champions Randy Orton and Riddle on the October 25th edition of Raw, but the match was pulled without explanation. Styles' absence has not been explained, while Omos has not missed any time. Here's a quote from Dave. I'm sure he's going to yell and scream about it at some point, but this is what they said, a non-injury medical issue.
Wait a minute, who's going to yell and scream about it?
I think he means AJ.
Why would AJ be... Okay, first of all, if Uncle Dave knows what the non-injury related issue is, then perhaps he should have told us, because he apparently knows or thinks he knows that AJ Styles is going to be screaming about it. What would he be screaming about?
You didn't let me ask my question.
Well, I'm just saying this doesn't make any sense. If it's not an injury, then has he got COVID or is he quarantined? Well, why would he be screaming about that?
There's my question. COVID or vasectomy?
What?
Non-injury medical issue. He's off TV for the last week. People were freaking out. COVID or vasectomy?
Well, where did vasectomy come from?
I'm thinking, what else could it be? A non-injury medical issue. That's not an injury. That's an elective surgery.
Well, but how do we know he had that at all?
We don't know.
Well, then you're just spreading shit just at random.
Isn't he very religious? This is a way to get around condoms.
Oh, I think he's just like a Southern Baptist or some kind of Georgia religious person. They're allowed to use proper adult birth control like normal people. I don't have any idea what this would be, except if he just either had to quarantine or whatever. They didn't tell the truth about Keith Lee. I don't know why anybody would be, embarrassed like, oh, don't tell him I got COVID, or upset about it or whatever. It's happened to a lot of people.
Well, he is somewhat outspoken in his thoughts and beliefs, AJ Styles. Would that be maybe something where he's going to yell and scream about it because he tested positive for COVID? You think that would cause him to yell and scream?
Okay. First of all,
the only other thing he's yelled and screamed about has been Paul Heyman.
Have we ever determined that he really believes the earth is flat or he's just fucking around?
I haven't heard anyone say that he doesn't believe it. But we don't have any concrete evidence like AJ saying the world is flat to point to.
But he just said there was things that needed to be discussed about it or something. But is he an anti-vaccine person also? And in case, yeah, maybe he would be embarrassed. But I don't know. I don't know why they're so. Also, here's another thing.
Do you think he'll blame Paul Heyman?
Well, everything can be Paul's fault at one point or another, but I remember guys used to just fucking not be on a show and you wouldn't think anything about it unless they say, oh, so-and-so hurt his ankle or so-and-so, hurt his shoulder. What? Okay. If they don't want to tell you the truth, then why do they tell you he's out with a non-injury related deal? Why? He's out hurt. It's a medical issue. Then all they do is start weasels like you speculating about getting the fucking tubes snipped or whatever.
Ah, so you're saying it's COVID?
I don't know what it is, but it's awful unwieldy to term something a non-injury medical issue. Then, okay, what has he got? Fucking projectile diarrhea or, chronic whooping belch? That just asks more questions or brings up more questions than it answers.
Is there a more WWE way to say it? He has a non-injury medical issue. There's no story. Why are you asking us?
Yeah.
It's clearly a non-injury medical issue.
Then he got checked out at the medical facility and then went over to get his title opportunity.
Wait, I got it. Hair transplant. That's a non-injury medical issue.
Now, okay, but last time I saw AJ, he had a pretty good looking head of hair.
Is it his?
Well, he bought and paid for it. Why wouldn't it be?
I don't know. It's very straight.
Well, so is AJ.
Well, apparently so. Remember, he was upset about the gay community's support of him way back. Can you name a non-injury medical issue?
Well, again, I've just to miss one show. Yeah. Fucking diarrhea.
Okay.
I've worked a few times where I shit myself every time I took a bump, but a non-injury medical issue that would cause you to miss a match could be a raging stomach flu. It could be who knows, but the non-injury medical issue, that's just inviting people to go, what the fuck are you hiding? Speak English.
All right, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Alec in Silicon Valley. Hi, Jim and Brian. I've sent this email a few times and did not get a response.
Well, you know whose fault that is.
But I'm a software engineer, so I've programmed my computer to keep emailing you guys daily until my question is read. I know it's a worthwhile question. If it's worthwhile to answer questions about wrestlers slapping themselves, then this should be good. I'm wondering if you guys know anything about the history of the Irish whip. I've always thought that even though this is a staple of wrestling, it seems highly implausible and makes it hard for me to suspend my disbelief. You can't make somebody run and bounce off the ropes by pulling them. At best, they would trip over their own feet. At worst, they would just stop in their tracks. As two guys who appreciate the perceived legitimacy of wrestling, do you think the Irish whip comes across as very phony?
If you're sitting there and staring at it and your mission is to break it down, then yes, you can break down everything. But the question is, when people do something and establish something well enough that you're willing to go with it. It doesn't strike you visually as something off kilter, like it's not like you're seeing an airplane wing on a submarine. Then your mind goes with it. And that was established somewhat early in wrestling, that if you throw someone into the ropes or they run into the ropes to get some momentum and they're bouncing off or whatever, there used to be more care taken in it, as everything at the start. If you had a headlock on a guy and a guy was going to throw you into the ropes, he wouldn't just shrug his body and you take off and run 10 or 12 feet to the ropes. He would start running with you and he would shove you off out of the headlock, and you would hit the ropes kind of off balance and be coming back, but you'd hit him with a tackle and you could make it work. With the arm whip, when guys actually grabbed the guy's hand and pushed him back with your right hand, and you got the momentum of the ropes going, and you pulled and you had the stance and you took steps with it and you followed through, and the guy's going and you're shoving him off with your right hand like everybody did it when the shoot off started, then that looked kind of okay. And you've seen the footage from the 50s of Buddy Rogers running those off-kilter spots where he would look off balance, where he's
yeah.
He looks like he's out of control and waving his arms even though he's not, but it looked like it was. Those things were done, and then a bunch of guys started copying it and doing it and putting less into it, and then it became an accepted thing, and now you have what I call the Vader arm whip, where poor Leon would just grab a guy by the arm and just fucking fling him with one arm and kind of touch him with the hand as he went by, not even taking a step, and the guy's going to run 20 feet corner to corner. Or the headlock shoot off where the guy just with his right hand just kind of shoves the guy off. Or now these head palm shoot offs where you just put your hand on the back of a guy's head and just will him into the ropes and he runs. Yeah, that's all bullshit. I can tell you, I can testify to you that I've been shot into the ropes by 4 or 5 times by guys that I had no choice but to go. I had a choice whether I came back or not, but you can, especially some of the bigger guys in this business, you can arm whip a motherfucker to where he's going to go to those ropes. He might not turn and hit him smoothly with his, back and the arm over the top rope the way he's supposed to, but he'll go into the ropes. Coming back, the question may remain. But that's the idea, is things were established when they looked halfway like they could happen. And then guys just started doing them and overdoing it and doing it too much, and everybody starts doing it, and it slowly loses the original. But the original Irish whip was not even a whip into the ropes or a whip into the turnbuckles. The original Irish whip, who would Dano O'Mahony was the first one, right?
He was certainly the first one to popularize it. He may have been the first one to ever do it. I'm not quite sure.
But the reason why it's called the Irish whip is because Dano O'Mahony in the 30s was a huge box office attraction. They put the world title on him. He was especially big in Boston and points in the Northeast because he was Irish. Imagine that, an Irishman in Boston being over. Who would have thought that? And his Irish whip was he would grab a guy's wrist with both of his hands.
See, I like that kind of Irish whip.
Yeah. And it was a combination of I'm jerking you and I'm ducking under your arm and I'm jerking down. And it was the whip where the guy took a front flip and it was like a judo throw with the holding the wrist. And that was the Irish whip. And that's what he actually won his matches with in some cases. And then when people started grabbing the wrist and ducking under it, but instead of jerking the guy into a forward flip, remember in the footage you see from the 50s and 60s, a guy will grab the wrist and he'll duck under the arm and twist the arm first before he shoots the guy off. So it's like he's not only got more control of it, but also that's the way that O'Mahony went into it. That's why the whip off started being called an Irish whip. The shoot off, rather, started being called an Irish whip. You whip a guy into the ropes. And even when I started watching wrestling in the early 70s, it was up to the announcer, because a lot of times when a guy would get a wrist lock and just do the thing where he ducks under and jerks the guy and he does the forward flip, that was the Irish whip to some announcers. Some announcers would only call it if it was the original version where you duck under the arm and not only jerk the guy forward, but flip him so that he's taking a rolling flip all the way across the ring. And then some announcers started calling it an Irish whip into the ropes when you just shot a guy off into the ropes. So it's evolved that way. But yes, in some cases it looks ridiculous. And in other cases, it looks good, and it depends on the perpetrators.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Swederson of Sweeterville, Sweden.
Swederson from Sweeterville, Sweden?
It says in parentheses, I've never met an English speaker who could pronounce my name, so fuck it. So this is from Swederson. Swederson in Sweeterville, Sweden.
I bet this will be a sweet question.
I saw the beautiful Bobby, close, wrestled a whopping 42 matches in March of 1986. Is this the world record for the most matches in a month? And how and why did that happen?
I can't imagine that's the world record. Because there was a lot of other guys on the same shows as we were. So he was probably, just because I have the Midnight Express record book, that doesn't mean that 10 or 12 of Crockett's other guys didn't work the same amount, or maybe even more. I don't know that we had a day off in March of 1986. If we did, it was maybe one. But Flair may have, Flair wouldn't have worked as many TV matches as we did. But a lot of the top guys, you could work.
Did anyone work as many TV matches as you guys did?
Yeah, a lot of the guys, just not as many good ones. But think of almost all the guys got a squash match on every TBS show. And then the Sunday show that was only 1 hour, some of those guys got two, and we taped those the same day. So let's say you went to Atlanta TV on a Saturday morning and did two shows, you had two matches. Then let's say, because this happened, on some occasions, there was an afternoon show on Saturday and then an evening show, so there's 4 on Saturday. Afternoon and evening, there's 6 on Sunday, so you got 6 matches in 2 days. And then you've got 3 more weekends that month, as well as the rest of the weeks. So, yeah, they weren't all 30 minutes long, and they weren't all main events, but yeah, that was not unusual at that period of time. I've seen guys, when I first started with the WWF, some guys had 4 or 5 matches on the same night because of those long marathon tapings where they taped a month's worth of TV, plus they had dark matches, plus stuff for Coliseum home video. Remember the night that me and Stan walked out of center stage for WCW, we were going to wrestle 4 times that night. So no, it wasn't unusual at all.
Do you know your record for a month? Most shows worked or most matches worked in a month?
I'd have to sit down and go through. It would have been with the Midnight Express, and I would have had to sit down and
do you think it would have been 86?
Go through it. Probably, because that was our busiest year. Although, when you take into account, when you talk about most matches, like I just read for a while there in Memphis, my rookie year, I was just going out with every heel on the spot shows. So there was one night in Bowling Green, there was 6 matches, and I was involved in 5 of them. The other match was a girls' match. But I wrestled.
And even then, Royal. Jim stayed away from the girls' matches.
Well, see there, I had to breathe. I managed 4 times. I had a handicap match. No, I managed 3 times, had a handicap match, and was in a battle royal. And so, in some cases, I was involved in Memphis in my rookie year in 25 or 30 matches a week. But so no, that was not it's just now everybody. It takes a day and a half to get to the show. You're there for a day, and it takes a day and a half to get home. That's why the guys don't wrestle it often anymore.
Well, Jim, here is our final question this week, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Pete on the topic of Bryan Danielson and CM Punk's first loss, who should they lay down to first, and who does the job first?
Again, you can't just make that up. It has to be in the moment. It has to be, what you're doing and what your idea is, what your mission is, what your return match or whatever you're wanting to get out of it, and who's involved. It can't just be, well, this guy ought to do a job before that guy, all things being equal. I got to be honest with you. I don't know why in the fuck that the next world title change would not be to one or the other of either CM Punk or Bryan Danielson. Because they had Paige in the spot, but all of a sudden it's like when you've got the really talented guy in the high school drama class that you want to star in the school play, but then suddenly a real professional actor from college gets somehow left behind and he shows up and, well, you got to go with that guy. If Paige had been cutting promos like the real badass one that he did a couple of weeks ago and seemed professional and had been associating with main event level talent since he'd been there, I'd say, yeah, you've got Punk and Danielson, still put the thing on Paige. But now it would be so ridiculous that, as we've said, through no real fault of Paige's own, unless he was on board with this tomfoolery, you've got this guy who's been riding job guys around on his lawnmower to ice cream, and you've got two megastars from the biggest promotion in the world that can wrestle a match with almost anybody. And you've already got Danielson, because Danielson and Twinkle Toes will be a better match, because I don't think Punk would probably want to put up with a lot of Twinkle Toes' foolishness, and I think Twinkle Toes knows that, so he's probably not anxious to work with Punk and have to show people that he doesn't know how to actually have a real match. He just knows how to, do the trained chimp stuff. So I think Danielson and Twinkle Toes is better because Danielson can get something that kind of half-ass makes sense out of anybody, and he can work more of that style. But I don't know why one of the two of them would not be the next AEW World Champion. Just for the sake of, then when you advertise AEW World Champion so-and-so defending against, somebody will know who the fuck that World Champion is besides the people that have already been watching the program. That's just me.
And both guys have had nothing but competitive matches since they've been in AEW, which is important to note here in terms of who they're going to do the job for first.
And that's another thing. It's, if they don't watch out, it's almost to the point of, if they do win beat some main event guy, it's like, well, fuck, they couldn't hardly handle Eddie Kingston, but they beat Chris Jericho or Twinkle Toes or Moxley or whatever. How did that happen? Must have been a fluke. I understand wanting to make guys look better than they are before you beat them, but this is the most generous bunch of people I've ever seen in my life. At some point, the whole good of the company depends on your champion, and there was more than just the fact that he's a self-centered prick as to why Hulk Hogan was not more generous with his jobs.
With that,
yes,
the drive-thru is closed. Look at that. Now
That's
people.
What people have really been waiting for.
Now 3 people have gotten the clap. That many people have not gotten the clap since Terry Taylor left Mid-South. But ladies and gentlemen, want to remind you the Jim Cornette Experience debuts this weekend. Wherever you find your favorite podcast, we'll be back next week with the drive-thru. Once again, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Go through the archives today from the very beginning in 2013 by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette. For $5 a month, you get access to the archive of the drive-thru and the experience. Of course, subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette for full episodes, clips of episodes, and omnibus collections. Find out why every other wrestling podcast is trying to copy what we do. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Of course, the amazing and exclusive Travis Heckel artwork and all of our amazing guest artists. Check it out today. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com, available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. You may have heard a little earlier, things are in the mail. Is that correct?
Some things are in the mail, some things are about to be in the mail, and big things are going to be happening in 2022.
At JimCornette.com. Of course, the drive-thru is brought to you by the law office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. And don't forget, Jim Cornette on the House of Kayfabe with Stephen P. New. This Monday, wherever you find your favorite podcast, search for House of Kayfabe with Stephen P. New. But until this weekend on the... Now, this is the drive-thru. On the experience, and next week back here on the drive-thru, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!